This interview is mostly meant as a way to address the allegations of wrongdoing levied at Zach in video form, as the direct accusations against Zach have all been addressed before, just not in this format. Although I do have some new questions I haven't seen answered. Um, Not necessarily allegations. I think you've covered almost everything before. Um, so I looked through a lot of things to find all these various questions or these various claims. Um, I'm sure a lot of them will be familiar with you, but I was going to start with one that I found interesting, um, and that
Well,
was hmm,
Ben, I before we start, I just thought, maybe explain who Michelle is because,
okay.
she's on the call too.
Um, well, I mean, I don't know how to describe
I mean,
Michelle
I don't know.
perfectly. I mean,
Michelle can do it. I could
yeah,
do it.
if you guys want to describe yourselves, that could work. I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, so because I know that she was a roommate and an assistant of yours, but beyond that, I don't know a whole lot.
Michelle, you want to go ahead and say who you are? I don't know.
Michelle, I was a roommate and assistant. I was also in a relationship with Mandy and Zach. We lived together on and off from 2010 till 2016.
So a good amount of time, and
Yeah,
not
and
not just
also,
not just coming and going. Like you lived in the same house.
Yeah, same room,
Yeah.
pretty much. Yeah.
yeah, we were in the same room and often the same bed. And Michelle was an assistant long before we were in a relationship. She had long quit being an assistant by the time that developed. But yeah, she's also a witness in most of the legal action going on, and probably Mandy's closest friend. I mean, definitely Mandy's closest friend until Mandy
Uh, Came out
didn't.
with her statement.
Yep,
Yeah,
and blocked you after you left your comment, I believe, on her Facebook post, right? Yeah. So, if you're ready for the question, I
sure.
think that
Yeah,
that should cover it. Yeah, because I guess some people wouldn't know. So, thank you
yeah.
for bringing that up. Um, so to start with, something I saw that Mandy had posted was this is a direct quote. She said, "I dreamt a lot of weird stuff last night, but one dream was my ex convinced me to get back together with him, and then we were sleeping on a mattress on the floor like when I first moved in with him. It took years for me to get him to buy us a real bed, and I woke up unhappy." And I looked at that, and I looked at some of her other things, like saying, for example, she said something about basically here. In any event, she will never date or marry someone again who cannot take care of themselves, make their own doctor's appointments, take out their trash, doesn't own a real bed and sheets, and doesn't possess basic life skills. And I'm just curious as to what you think about that. Was that like a problem? Was that a thing that she commonly complained about? Is it, or is that just reimagining of events? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think that you have to, everything that Mandy says now seems to be like she reads a lot of Twitter posts about situations that, like, the bad boyfriend stories, and then tries to make her story sound like them. And I'm not even sure she realizes she does that at this point. But like, I had a futon on a futon frame, which folded up into a couch, and when she first moved in, and I remember we had a really specific conversation about her moving in. I was like, I work all day, like in a little room. I had a roommate. We had a 4-room railroad flat. I wasn't, like I was basically just out of school, um, and had some success as an artist, but I wasn't spending money like crazy, and I was still living with my roommate. And I had a little like Tokyo style apartment. And I said, I'm going to be working all day, and you're going to, be there, either you're working or playing video games or, keeping yourself busy. I'm just letting you know that's what life's going to be like. And she was like, no, that sounds great. That's great. She never had a single complaint about that. She did photo shoots in that room. She would, but I think, she reads online that people are like, oh, men don't know how to take care of themselves. And that's like a common complaint, right? It's like
hmm,
not like Mandy was a person who Michelle can speak to this. Mandy was not a person who bustled around the house doing chores that we couldn't do. She was a sick person. And Michelle and I are fantastic slobs because we're both punks, basically. But the only tasks Mandy was ever asked to do basically were things that you could do if you were sick in bed after a while, because she was getting sicker and sicker. So I'd be like, hey, can you pay this bill? Hey, can you do this? Because everyone else was doing everything else. And unlike a lot of people, much of the time we had an art student or somebody who would work for us once a week who would do the dishes and clean the things and do all that stuff. Like, so I wasn't like, it's like an example of Mandy's kind of changing her story to sound like other people's stories that she's heard. These were not, if you had asked her at the time, like, oh, how do you feel about, I don't know, there's paint on the wall, she'd be like, no, we love it. We love the way this is, you know, like
It's the life we're living.
Yeah. I mean, Michelle can probably speak to this too, because she got a lot of the brunt of this. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, our downtown apartment, we were there for a whole year before Mandy even knew where the garbage chute was on our floor.
She just never, that was not something she did.
Yeah.
Okay. So
yeah, it's not like I don't blame her for it, you know?
Of course not. Yeah.
You know, but it was like, it's a weird complaint from someone who literally had assistants who are now witnessing against her, all of them. You know, all of them have supported me in one way or the other, or directly like saying like, yeah, no, because these are people who come into they would come to the apartment at noon, and the first thing that they had to do on the 1 day a week that they were working is like whatever Mandy needed, you know? And the second thing they would do is wash all the dishes and take the trash out and do all that stuff. And if I couldn't afford an assistant, then basically, if Mandy complained about something, it would be done right away as long as one of us was home. But I think that I think sick people can get very grumpy, for lack of a better word, because they can't do things themselves and it's upsetting to them and frustrating. And I think that she'd be like, why isn't everyone doing this already? Because she senses what the next thing she's worried about is, and we don't, because we're doing our jobs and work and stuff. But it so doesn't sound like Mandy in a certain sense. Like, it doesn't sound like the person she was. It sounds like she read complaints on the internet and was like, how do I make myself sound like one of these women that complains about a terrible boyfriend, you know? Yeah.
So in general, whenever you had assistants, that was mainly to help you because you were painting or because you were working in that area or that space, but because of the additional concerns that Mandy had. I mean, oftentimes that assistant was helping you by taking her, like driving her to doctor's appointments or dealing with dishes. So that's what you're saying, is that it's not that you couldn't do it, it's that you had other things you had to do. And so
also, like, literally every person that ever drove Mandy to a doctor's appointment, other than like an Uber driver or a taxi driver, is on my side. Like, they have written to me being like, yeah, Mandy's wilding out. You know, like, Mandy had to be driven to appointments. Mandy, like, constantly. She had 2 or 3 a week. And she needed, you know, in addition to just medicine, like, oh, I need this blanket, I need this special soap, like, whatever it is. Like, Mandy had random new things that she needed all the time, which is fine. She was sick. But, like, it's a strange thing where the person that we kept alive is accusing us of not being able to survive on our own, you know? Like, I don't know.
It's just something that stuck out to me because it's
in
an
a way,
interesting thing.
I don't want to dwell on it because obviously there are more serious accusations, but it does sort of show, like, just look at the person in interviews that you see on, you know, if you look on video of her at that time, like, is this a person who looks like who's super concerned about, like, you know, whether there's a mess in the apartment, you know? Like, this is just not where her head was at the time. She just, anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
So she's made a lot of different claims in her big statement that she made. So I pulled some of them out, and and this is another one that I guess is an interesting one. She said that you exposed her to death and rape threats intentionally, and you were not sympathetic, and you would gloat when you caused harm to others. So it wasn't like they were directed at her. You would get some threat, and then you would show it to her and not realize that it was freaking her out. That's kind of what I guess she's claiming. At least that's what it seems like.
I mean, okay, no, first of all, but starting almost as I mean, as soon as we had any kind of public profile for the D&D with porn stars like blog or the project, we just got, you get what the internet gets. You get a million views. We got a million views ish on the first I Hit It With My Axe show.
Mhm.
So you're going to get a lot of hate, and a lot of it was coming from something awful. I didn't like no, I didn't want that to happen. I didn't deliberately make it happen, but she was my partner, and of course we discussed it, and she discussed it like a grown up.
Mhm.
Like she was like, yeah, this is stupid and these people are morons. And if you read what she says at the time, or you read or listen to the interviews that she was giving, she's like, she just sounds like me with a higher pitched voice, uh and yeah, like someone from Something Awful, which is the platform that Etten and people who are important on the OSR Discord come from, Nico 10 and Erica with a K, said, "I hope you get raped and murdered." They said that to her after she wrote a post, and it was like, she was in the hospital. It was the height of this harassment where they had like this crazy Tumblr post about how my plan was to push women out of the hobby of role playing games, which I guess Michelle can speak to that.
Yeah.
I mean,
But the mostly female group that we were playing
Mhm.
with, and
it's like step one of my plan is pretty stupid, like people. Let's not mince words. Like the reason that I was at all like quote influential in the OSR scene is because in the beginning a bunch of people were like, oh, this group is interesting. It's a group of all women, and more diverse than the people who were kind of advertising themselves as diverse gamers ever were.
Mhm.
And they didn't like that. They didn't like that the people who were obviously literally like visually obviously in your face different than the stereotypical gamers didn't like the games that they liked. They didn't like to talk about things in the sort of circular endless way that but and get yeah, no, I trusted Mandy as a partner, and I talked to her about real problems that existed,
Mhm.
like
well, the other thing
she's
too is that like we had this thing out here, and we were all looking at the comments. It's not like we're like, oh, there's mean comments in there, and like we don't want to see them. And Zach was like, no, look at these. Like we we were all looking into like what people were saying. It
Yeah.
wasn't
You were
hushed on. It
you were
was
a group. I mean, you all
yeah,
were sharing that information. I'm sure you all got, to see what to know what's going on. Because I'm sure it wasn't all bad comments. There, like
yeah.
you said, there's people who supported you, but there's also those people. But Zach didn't you're saying Zach didn't weaponize her. He didn't bring it up when nobody else was. It was kind of
Yeah.
a group
No,
thing.
yeah.
Okay.
also like you have to really make a elaborate psychological theory to think about a guy who wants to do these things that Mandy's describing. Like, I want Mandy in my apartment. I want, to play games with her and hang out with her and like take care of her and spend like most of my money keeping her alive. And I also just want her to be upset for random reasons all the time. It's
Mm.
like you can construct a theory of like a supervillain, but like nobody's even done that in court. Like there's never been an expert witness who comes in and goes, this is a psychological profile of this person who does all these completely contradictory things. Like, oh, they like find people in the community that they like their work and they help them and get them hired, but then they also try to destroy them and belittle them. And like it's like everybody has in their life someone who's kind of shitty and controlling, but like you have to make the case of like why, like, I don't know. It's just, who is this person that she's trying to make up? Like I deliberately kept the apartment messy to fuck with her? Like, and I hired an assistant and spent money on that to clean it constantly and told him to do whatever Mandy wanted. Like, who is this guy? Like, what is his weird plan? You know, it's like a comic
Mhm.
book villain that's been written by like 20 different writers because it has. Like, Mandy has basically taken a story that was started 10 years ago by like the worst, shittiest people on the internet, and then that character has been passed to another group of shitty people on the internet, and then it was passed to Mandy, and now she's writing the story, and then it was passed back to the internet while she's been quiet for the last 3 years, and they're writing the story, and it's like this character is not being written very consistently, you know.
Mm. So I mean, that's kind of the thing, is like a lot of what she said in those tweets or in that initial post is things that, you know, for example, like um another witness or another person on Mandy's side said, I mean, just basically talked about things that you and Mandy would say to each other, like jokes or inside things that you guys would talk about. They're recontextualized, like, you know, that instead of being a joke, like you repeated it enough and it wasn't a joke, it was a threat. Um, trying to make sure I know which one said that.
I think that was probably in Hannah's thing.
I thought it was too, but I'm not sure. It might have. Yeah, I think it was. Because the one, yeah, yes, it was. I have the note. She also said, you would say the phrase "chin up" all the time, and at first she said she thought it was meant to be like stay positive, but then she claims that it was that you didn't want Mandy to have a double chin, which is pretty wild.
I think the thing is simply that if you have a like there are things that can be abusive that don't fit under like the obvious definition of abuse, right? Like that's a real, right? You can be like, if you know your partner hates beans and you just make beans every day, and then every single day for 10 years you go, hey, are you having beans? Like, there's something fucked up about that, right? Like, but you have to, if it is like that, you have to tell them that this is a problem, like that they don't, you know, and it's like, these were not things that she raised, you know, like the first, like when Mandy first came to live with me, the first thing she did was go to a bunch of doctors. Um, and one of them said, like, the first thing to do is work on your posture because, you know, she was a sick person, and she had uh, large breasts and was always kind of bent over. And it was like, you have to stand up straight. And Mandy had a corset fund. When I met her, she had a little jar full of change she was saving and dollars she was saving to get a corset because she already knew that she needed to correct her posture. And so the chin up thing was about that. If at some point she started to feel badly about it, then what an adult does is you go to the person and you go, hey, I want you to not do this thing anymore. You know,
Hmm.
like that's that's something nerds have a real problem with, like the idea that you might like go to someone and have a conversation with them because somehow the confrontation seems scarier than just pissing them off by telling the entire internet that they're a shithead. I don't know. But it was like, yeah, I mean, I don't have a motive to make, like, I lived in a one room apartment, still do, with this sick person. Like, she was never more than 70 feet from me in a normal day. It doesn't help me if she can't sleep or she's upset. Like, if you can imagine living in a, 70 feet from a person for 10 years, you don't want them in a bad mood. You don't want them suffering all the time. Your day will suck. Like, I'm sitting here trying to paint, and then I've done something totally gratuitously to make Mandy's life harder, like to irritate her, like that I didn't have to do. Like, this character doesn't make sense, like I wouldn't piss her off for fun, like that doesn't help me get through my day. That doesn't make anything that I like. I don't get any more of that by being like, oh, there's this thing that you don't like me to say, I'm going to keep saying it. Like, this is all after the fact.
Yeah.
And if she couldn't articulate it, then there's nothing stopping her from articulating it even after we broke up in an email or something. Like, but just deciding these things are abusive after the fact because it sounds good is ridiculous. Or deciding that something is a joke is not a joke. But Michelle can speak to, like, Michelle was there 24/7. So Michelle can speak to, like, whether me going, like, the question of Mandy getting pregnant came up a lot. Like, was that ever a conversation that we had? I don't know.
She always talked about how she was scared of getting pregnant, how she couldn't handle being pregnant, and how she was very, very careful. But
yeah, and we had condoms the whole time that we were together. Like, we wore condoms unless we were shooting a movie.
We talked about once, like, if some kind of apocalypse happened, she was like, first thing we have to do is like break into the drugstores and get condoms.
Yeah. Like, so the idea that the conversation of Mandy having a kid and me going, oh, if you had a baby, I'd kill you, came up a lot in our, like, it was just off the table. I mean, Caroline, in her own statement, like, said, like, her understanding, one of the first times she talked to Mandy is Mandy said she couldn't have kids, or it wasn't safe for her to have kids. Like, again, it's like, this is a different person now than the one that we knew.
And so, like, a big part of what's happened here is a lot of these things are things that happened that are very, very recontextualized, at least a lot of the inane things. Whereas stuff like you were very violent and angry, or you would not stop if somebody said no, things like that are completely fabricated, completely, because that's like not, that doesn't, I mean, you didn't pressure Mandy to groom women, which is something she claimed. You didn't mistreat
Again,
women in front of her.
Michelle can speak to that. Like, I don't know, how did Mandy hit on women, Michelle?
Oh, she was fast and loose with hitting on women. She liked the ladies. She enjoyed having women over.
Was she, like, do you feel like it was like initiated by me, or like I was pushing her beyond her boundaries with that?
No, she was usually the instigator.
I think that's like an interesting kind of thing, because I think what a lot of people have latched onto that because of is like they don't understand what that kind of a relationship is like, where you've got more than two people, and it's not as simple as hold up, there we go. It's not as simple as you know, only Zach was calling the shots or something. Both Zach and Mandy had their own things that they were doing. It wasn't it's not as simple as like Zach trying to control Mandy. Mandy controlled what she wanted to control. Is
Also,
what
the
I've
idea
heard and read, right?
the idea of controlling Mandy is crazy. I mean, I don't like, all Mandy would have to say in any situation is that she felt sick or was in pain, and the whole day ground to a halt. Like, Michelle lived in the apartment. I don't know. Like, I just feel like you could speak to that. Like, I can say it a million times.
Any plans? Any like having people over, going somewhere? Like, as soon as Mandy said, "I don't want to do it," then nobody's doing it.
But it was also like, it's like she was like,
and it's like, okay, what can we do for you to make you feel better?
yeah, you couldn't even pretend. Mandy couldn't even pretend to go along with things that she didn't like. Like, she didn't put up with stuff. Like, she was just like immediately, like, would go straight to, like, I'm like, you can watch it. I hit it with my axe, like, in the videos or any of her interviews. Again, it's like, as soon as she isn't interested in what's going on, she just immediately be like, yeah, I'm done. Like, it's a strange thing to think, like, of, like, Mandy could not physically hurt anyone, but she could get online and complain about you instantly, and then everyone would hate you because she's disabled. Like, it was, and she could wreck your life instantly, and she did. Like, the idea, like, I don't know, I was scared of her on a certain level. Like, I didn't realize how scared I should have been, but, like, you don't want to piss off Mandy. You will have a bad day if you piss off Mandy.
Yeah, she had no problem telling people, or when someone did something she didn't like they were instantly like blocked, like cut out of her life. Just like she didn't like something, she was not putting up with it.
Mm. And so that wasn't like a change that happened overnight. That's been a constant thing. Like whatever priorities she had, if you were against those priorities or causing her consternation, like she's not going to be your friend, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I had to spend a decent amount of time mediating between Mandy and her best friends. Like all those people who did drive her to her doctor's appointments. Like, again, every single one of them at least had one big blow up with Mandy. And I had to be like, okay, Mandy, you got to understand that, this person's done a lot for you and yada, yada, and this is this. And then I'd say to the other person, you got to understand Mandy's very sick and she gets upset easily because she's impatient and in a lot of pain. But like, I mean, that's why when we broke up, I almost didn't take it personally because she has sort of pissed off everyone she knew in LA. Like, I was like, okay, I'm just the last on a list of people that she's lost patience with because we're not as sick as her,
Well, and it
like,
was something that wasn't going to get better necessarily or at
no,
all.
no.
It's like something that was just going to
Yeah.
continue to escalate. And so that's a big part of this as well, is that like her condition was hard to manage. That's why you needed help a lot of the time. Because she
Yeah.
couldn't just go somewhere else and do something else a lot of the time,
Yeah.
if
I mean,
ever.
again, I just spend a lot of time being like, okay, that must be tremendously frustrating for her. She must be really bored. She is irritated in the way that anyone is irritated when they're sick and things are just a little bit harder than they should be. And after a while, you lose patience. But at the same time, she could be really unsympathetic to to her friends' problems and the people around her. And I'm saying this not to paint her as being so bad that bad things happen or don't matter, but to explain like how improbable it is that someone would choose to bait the bear, like
Hmm.
you didn't intentionally fuck with Mandy ever, especially if you're her husband, like I tiptoed around her sensibilities constantly, and I was happy to do it too.
Yeah. Hmm. Okay, maybe I'll jump to some of the other people that wrote statements alongside Mandy. Um, so maybe I'll go to Jennifer and talk about some of the stuff she said. She claimed you habitually abused or assaulted women. You would degrade women to their faces. You would talk badly about them behind their backs. And it's like, I mean, I don't know what to say to that other than, I mean, she was there, Mandy was there. They seem to agree on this. What?
I mean, that one's actually really easy because I just had a whole bunch of like really long phone calls with Jennifer because I had
Mm,
to sue her because the statute of limitations for suing her is about to be up. So
mm,
I started suing her, and then she's talking, and so basically, again, this is a situation where the last time I saw her was like maybe 10 years ago, and
mm,
since then we've only had a good relationship online. Like, oh, Facebook. Like she asked me. Our last conversations where she asked me for to be interviewed for her magazine that she was starting, to get her a Bernie sticker for her bicycle, and to get her husband or boyfriend like some collectible sneakers because he's like one of those guys, and I live in LA. That's it. Like there was no sign of any of this. So remember that all of those accusations are 10 years after the fact, right? There's also a document in the court records where Mandy makes the kind of complaints she's been making now online to Jennifer in a Facebook DM. Jennifer says, "Oh, I didn't know any of this. I would have wanted to keep being friends with Zach or keep talking, be on friendly terms with Zach if it wasn't for this."
mm.
And then she changed her tune immediately. So it's like she out of loyalty to Mandy, I guess, she recontextualizes everything. But then when I asked for the specifics of this stuff, she's like, well, okay, my statement was basically I was saying what I had heard from Mandy. Like in other words, like when she's saying I have done these things, what she meant is she heard these things secondhand from Mandy and the other people that Mandy wrangled up. And then she said, well, when we were together, you said this and this and this and this. And I said, are those things abuse? And she was like, no. Jennifer said she specifically is not a victim of abuse, at least not from me. And she said that the other shit was shit that she heard secondhand. And then she was like, well, and I was like, every woman you've seen me with was I sexually assaulted them or whatever the fuck she said. And she's like, and I'm like, first of all, why are you seeing me with all these women? Because you were having sex with them in 3 ways. Like there was never a situation where Jennifer just sat by with binoculars watching me have sex. Like, so, and I'm like, so did you sexually assault them? And she's like, no, I didn't. And it's like, and what that boils down to is eventually there's one woman, that's it, that's actually not this isn't a secondhand description from Mandy or whoever else. There was one girl, we had sex with this girl. Jennifer then, after Mandy's thing, decided she felt like there was some kind of uncomfortable situation, didn't ask the girl, and said to me, I said, if you asked that girl if she was sexually assaulted and she said no, would that matter? And she said no, which is a level of special that I don't really know how to deal with. But yeah, I think Jennifer's just balls out trying to support Mandy, and a person who, I mean, separate from all of this, like she's been through a lot, like I knew that at the time, and I think that she's just internally heavily motivated to sort of, believe accusations and try to support them. But at the same time, she's in a little bit of a logical catch-22 here.
One of the things in her statement that was kind of, I think, partially telling in this kind of a conceptually interesting is she said, I don't want this to reach him because I don't want to deal with the fallout. I kind of find that an interesting thing to put on a public post, and just, attaching all these things like you're manipulative, you resort to gaslighting, you use BDM spaces, like enable, like doing wrong things. Yeah. She says all these things, but then she says, I don't want it to reach him, and makes a public post. It's like, that doesn't make sense unless she's trying to, just support me.
Post, and she's like, I don't want this to be a discussion.
Yeah. And that's why whenever you tried to get in there, I mean, you left your comment, problems arose.
There's this overall thing that, like, people want they want life to be 4chan. They want to be able to make accusations they want to be sniped from cover, like they want to be able to make an accusation, but they don't actually want anyone to question what it would be, why we should believe it or whether it's true. And in any other context besides a sexual one, everyone goes, that's not fair and that's evil, but there's an angle from which, she's like, well, why does, we're talking on the phone. Again, I've had several conversations now with Jennifer because she was like, because I'm suing her, and she's like, well, why does so-and-so have to be brought into this? I'm like, because they're your quote evidence that this happened. Like, you're not claiming you're a victim, which means you have to bring in all these other women who will not testify for you. And a lot of them will have come forward to me directly and said, you're full of shit. Like, that's why they're being dragged into this. And it's like, somehow, I think this and in all of the game stuff, like the internet shit about the online shit, is people don't think this line of reasoning all the way through. But if you really looked at it, this is what they think. They just want to be able to talk. They really want to be able to talk. They don't understand there's a line where talking turns into accusations, and accusations have real effects. And they don't want to acknowledge that that's there. It's the same way, like, people want to download their fucking free books and their free comics. And, like, they don't want to think about, like, like, I'm not worried that Marvel Comics is losing money, but, like, it's the same thing. They don't want to think about they think about what they want to do, which is Jennifer wants to talk about her feelings about, about supporting Mandy, essentially, and now that Mandy's made an accusation. She doesn't want to talk about, like, the practical implications for her victim, me, or for Michelle, or for anybody else who I'm connected to who's kind of had a lot of the things that are part of their normal life disrupted because this giant fucking steamroller has been driven over.
It's like cataclysmic thing.
Yeah, I mean,
because I mean, when they make accusations like that then, like you said, bleeds over to the other people that were involved. For somebody like you, Michelle, I mean, you lived in the same space. If they're alleging that Zach is constantly assaulting and abusing women, that makes you implicit if you're there and you're just fine with it, right? I mean, that's got to be part of why you had to speak up and say, like, I didn't see this. I can't.
When Mandy was talking about how she wanted to like make this post and stuff, like she tried to get me in on her side too. She tried to like put seeds in my head, like, oh, like remember when Zach did this? Like, wasn't that kind of awful? Like kind of trying to pull me over to her side, and I just kind of wasn't feeling it. I was like, man, I don't really see it that way. Yeah, she tried to get me to recontextualize like my memories of like what happened when we all lived together, and I guess some people bit and I didn't.
But
So I get.
also, like, every single time anyone says anything about this, they're saying that Michelle and all the other witnesses are lying. Like, in order to maintain that I believe Mandy, you have to say I don't believe Michelle, because Mandy's post was not about things that Michelle didn't see. Like, it was about how she was treated day to day,
Yeah.
very much of it. And Michelle saw that, and so did Kimberly Kane, and so did all like the people who worked for us, like our assistants who were in and out of the house like once a week at minimum. Like, there was our life was observed heavily, and like all the people, Charlotte was there all the time. Like, these were the people, like, if Mandy was alone with a girlfriend talking to her about her husband, which is a thing that happens, it was these women.
Yeah.
Like,
We never heard anything about this till a couple years after you break up. It's just like,
I mean,
oh,
you'd go on like a drive to the doctor, or you'd take her somewhere, and these are the kinds of things that would come up. And also, after they broke up, you were still met. Like all these people were messaging her online, and that's when it started. All this information started getting put out. It
mm,
wasn't during any of the relationships or anything like that.
and it was also stuff that she could so easily have done something about, like, it wasn't this sort of like, she wasn't locked into some situation where people wouldn't have been sympathetic. She had a, we had a joint bank account. She had always had enough money to fly home. Like, her sister was constantly in contact with her. Her sister talked to me after all of this. Like, her sister was like, yeah, Mandy's crazy. Like Mandy's sister is like the closest person in her age. I made a graph at one point that was like it was how long people knew Mandy versus whose side they took. And it was like there's two or three people who spent very little time with Mandy, Hannah and Jennifer in real life, and Viv. Like, and then everybody else. Like, including her mom and her sister. Like, her sister's known her whole life, like they're comparable age. Like, Michelle's probably known her longer than anyone else who's appeared on the trial who's not related to her. The people who constantly were in contact with Mandy were all like, yeah, this is crazy, like, this is like, and like Zach's day-to-day treatment of you was, I don't know how you'd summarize it, but it wasn't the opposite of this supervillain.
yeah. It's like whatever the opposite of abuse is.
I mean, yeah, that's the crazy thing. This is not a Johnny Depp Amber Heard thing where we were shitty to each other all the time and yelling. Like, this wasn't a tempestuous relationship where you measure, like, well, did it become abuse? This was like, I was trying at all times to make sure she not only wasn't hurt, but didn't think that she was hurt, because otherwise she might argue with her friends and be more isolated. Like, I was just,
I mean,
I don't know how to say it without sounding crazy, but like, if I could think of a thing that would make Mandy's life easier, not only would I do it to make her life easier, but also it would make my life easier.
mhm.
Like, I didn't want her to be uncomfortable. I didn't want her to be irritated by a death threat unnecessarily. I didn't want her to be cut out of decisions, because if I cut Mandy out of a decision and made it myself, what would happen? I would hear about it real soon and get yelled at. Like, it was to my advantage to be nice to her, and I liked her a lot. She was the center of my universe, and she needed a lot of help. Like, it's the weirdness is being depicted as the complete opposite of
Mhm.
the person I was. This is like a level of like, I don't know. It's like the Hitler thing. The bigger the lie, the more likely people are to believe it. Because it makes it seem like everything was a conspiracy.
Mm. you had talked a little bit about like looking at how long people knew Mandy versus people who knew her very little. And
Yeah.
maybe that's also part of why like the community at large who did not know Mandy or who did not interact with Mandy, like even in person, let alone digitally very often, a lot of those people just went along with it because all they saw was the statement. They didn't see her day to day. They didn't see, what she said other than through that lens, I guess.
Yeah,
Because there's a lot of
they
people who just took it and ran with it without ever talking to her.
Yeah, no, and I don't think she did talk to a lot of people. That wasn't part of her plan. She hasn't talked about in detail about any of this. And when you see her give depositions and stuff, it's clear she hasn't even thought about it in very much detail because she's constantly confused by it. She's like, oh shit, she's acting like someone who didn't expect like really basic questions.
Mhm.
Um, like I sit around and think about this shit every day because it's all I think about. It's the only thing I can do. It's just try to fix the situation and then have a life again. But she just sort of it has such a parallel with the way people are acting online about game stuff. They want to fire and forget. They being asked to go into any well, really, if do you think that, then what? Seems like it hurts them and or offends them in some way. It upsets them to be asked to think.
It's just it's a convenient permanent tool that they don't realize is permanent or public. They want to just say something and it not be a thing that's like forever. When people put a Twitter post, I mean, people can screen cap it, people can look at it and go, "Why are you saying this?" And that's not what they wanted.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
is
I mean,
interesting.
I think everyone's consistently seen that. Somewhere online, right? Where you said this, and all they have to do is go, yeah, maybe I misspoke. I was being kind of lazy. I was talking out of line, or I was kind of off the cuff. I didn't really mean it. And that actually, I've seen that as a defense of someone accusing me of assault. Like in the lawsuits, there's actually one person who's like, yeah, I don't think about what I write online very much. It's just sort of momentary thoughts. That's their only defense. Like they aren't saying that I did it. Like they're like it's kind of bizarre, but it's like that is um it is something that it baffles my mind that like that.
That can even happen. That
Well,
people
also I think that a lot of people online are not used to the idea that their life is they don't have a life like me and Mandy where they get googled for a living essentially, like that, and so they don't realize that. But it's also the same for like people, they don't realize that when they talk shit about a game designer, like that, like if you google a game designer and you've claimed that they don't pay their people or whatever, and that's not true, that like you've just affected their real life. They aren't used to the idea that they have power in a certain sense, especially because in Mandy's case she has power because she's an accuser in a sexual allegation, in 2022 after 2016, but in the case of a small game community, they don't realize like it's a tiny community essentially with only a few thousand people buying and selling things. You can really fuck up a creator or publisher's lives, and they are not these people way above you. They're just people with the by spreading misinformation about them, even accidentally, even in a tweet. And I just think people don't they aren't used to that
mm,
emotionally. They're not used to the idea of their words having impact, because in a lot of ways, like these are people who have thought of themselves as powerless their whole lives. Like they really like just talking to people who are like, oh, what can be done about your situation? I'm like, you're thinking that you're powerless. There's only 2,000 people in the full fucking OSR, probably, like you have a tremendous amount of power if you're just, it's like, but people think of themselves as powerless, and they are offended and upset at the idea that something that they said might affect someone, and they want to sort of escape the responsibilities around that. And I think, and that's, I don't know, I guess I've lived with that my whole life. Like I've always thought that, maybe because my mom was a reporter, I was like, oh yeah, what you say is meaningful. I don't know. Yeah. I found the graph.
oh, that's
Uh,
good. You'll have to look at it
so
sometime.
Jennifer was in constant contact for Mandy for about 1 week of her life. Hannah, same. Viv lived with her for 6 months. Those are the three people who joined on to Mandy's thing. Cody, our former roommate, also lived with Mandy for 6 months on my side. Morgana was constant contact with Mandy for 24 months on my side. Our former assistant, 24 months on my side. Frankie, who was in I Hate With My Axe and whatever, 24 months. Carolyn, 36 months. Angela, 48 months. She lived across the hall. Ella, again, played D&D with us, 48 months. Lainey, 48 months. Alondra, 48 months. Alana, former assistant, 60 months. Kimberly Kane, 60 months. Mandy's best friend for Charlotte Stokely, 72 months. Michelle, about 100 months. Mandy's sister and Mandy's mom. All of those people are green. They've either like explicitly helped out in court or they've been supportive, in general of me. It's like people who didn't really know her or believe her,
And you can see that correlation pretty directly because it's hard to imagine the situation until you're involved in it. And I saw a lot of people's response saying like, I bought a car or I did specific things to try to help Mandy because as they dealt with Mandy, they saw what was happening.
Yeah, literally Kimberly Kane, who like the specific model of car she bought was like so that if she had to put Mandy's wheelchair in the back, she could. Like she got and it was like because she knew like she was Mandy's best friend and taking Mandy to the hospital or to a doctor's appointment or just to the store was just part of her life. And all these people don't count in Mandy's thing. Like these were all part of the illusion that was those 10 years of Mandy's life, which was all, I think it's also leaning into a porn stereotype, which I think, I don't know, like people want to believe that people who are in porn are like, naive deers in the headlights. I don't know. Again, Michelle could speak to that. Like,
I've got some questions kind of involving some of that. So we'll get to that. I wanted to double back and we had talked about, people are making posts that are public and not wanting them to be like looked at again or not thinking about that. One of Mandy's things that she said that a lot of people went crazy about was she said that you wrote some of her Tumblr posts. And that was something that you specifically refuted, right, Michelle? Because you saw them being written.
I forget what post exactly it was about was it sexism in the RPG community and some being under attack by certain communities, and she spent a long time writing that, and when she finally finished it and had us read it, and she was like, I'm just worried that people are going to think that Zach wrote this. And later on she said that, oh, Zach wrote it and made me publish it under my name. And I was like, that's not how things happened. I was there for that.
She also said in court, like she dialed it back. So in her Facebook post, she's like, Zach wrote the post. And then in court, when she was actually grilled about it, she was like, okay, Zach helped. She knew that that's what these people wanted to hear. It's like, and I think, now she's dating one of the dudes who was in on the harassment campaign. I think because her social circle has shrunk to people that she knows online. But she's dating a guy who, according to her Twitter, from Onyx Path, who was like one of the dudes who helped, like, who was part of the harassment campaign. And I think that like she is in touch with people who were harassing us and kind of she knows what they want to be true. Like
the people that were against her were usually using those people to be against you in a lot of cases. So when that flipped, simple. Yeah. When that flipped, like maybe they wanted it, or she was like more sympathetic to them, or
people who are hating on other gamers while pretending to be feminist about it don't want to argue with women. So Mandy, I would literally ask Mandy what to write about any given sort of issue concerning women. There are interviews on my blog. You can go look at them. Like I would ask her what to write and I would write it sometimes in interview form or sometimes just be like, this is what Mandy says. And then people would argue with that opinion and they would tag me and they would they'd say that I'm the bad person for having this opinion. And they would leave her out of it because they know that it's no point. It's a bad idea to pick a fight on the internet with a woman who's disabled and a porn actress, right? And so but this is actually a common tactic, right? Like you actually want to be able to discuss an issue that has to do with women's things, but you don't want to argue with a woman who disagrees with you, so you pick a guy.
Yeah, to like redirect that.
Nobody ever tells Michelle she's wrong directly very much. They tell me I'm wrong for saying what Michelle said.
Or what I
say that I said what I said because that's what Zach told me to say.
Yeah, that's what I saw a lot of, is that people would say, like, you're not even a person, you're like a sock puppet, or you're somehow, you know, I saw some really early comments that were like, the people are only there playing with him because they think they're gonna like get like a career advantage, or they're being controlled or whatever.
Also, like, just Michelle, crazy. Tell everybody where you are and what you're up to geographically, like how I
well, like what I'm up to these days.
Yeah, I mean, how would I be controlling you right now?
You know, yeah, I live in Canada. I live in a small town. I work as a waitress at a pub. You know, I don't have really anything to gain by spouting stuff that Zach tells me to say.
Mhm.
It literally has no effect on my life. I'm just here because my friend is telling the truth and I want to back him up.
Because I mean, I think based on the statements I saw, you were one of the first people to reach out to Zach and say like, hey, like I want to try to help, because you had a moral compass about it.
Yeah.
And you tried to do something. You tried to put a counter argument under Mandy's post, and that didn't go anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, because people were like, well, that's not what this is for. Like, this is for people to believe Mandy.
This isn't a discussion. They weren't trying to go for a discussion.
Yeah.
Just, I don't know. It's just, maybe because I'm Jewish, it's just so bizarre that that's how anyone thinks anything works. Like, this assertion about a felony occurring is not to be discussed.
It's just flat out. They just want it to be flat out what it is, and they don't want any dissenting voice.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's how they want the whole. Again, it goes. This is the whole discussion of everything in the gaming scene. Is like, are you saying like, what do you imagine is done with statements in the world? You know, we evaluate with we have to care whether they're true. Like, it seems like the most basic thing to do with a statement is care whether it's true or not.
Especially if the statement's saying that crimes have occurred.
Yeah. Because I mean, some of these are like lesser than others. I mean, some are just, he's mean, he's an asshole, he's bad. But a lot of these are, you're raping people, you're using them, like you're doing bad things, and it just is not backed up by just all the evidence as it stands, or as I've seen it. And then just talking about, you know, all these little things like we talked about, they got recontextualized, or I hate this camera, that got, you know, altered to be in a negative light instead of just the normal day-to-day things that happened. That's crazy. So we talked about a little bit about Jennifer and Hannah and Viv. That's something I didn't know, that they were, you know, only around for a short amount of time. I thought that some of them were there for longer.
Yeah, I mean, basically, Jennifer was someone I knew before I knew Mandy, and we hung out, and she lived in Germany. So we would only see Jennifer when she visited the US for a short period of time, or we visited her. We weren't traveling that much. And like, so, and during that whole time, our relationship was amicable. It was only much, you know, after Mandy made her complaints that Jennifer said anything. And it was 10 years after the last time we'd seen her. Hannah lived with us for a week. And toward the end of our relationship, that's it. So that's how long Hannah had to kind of, you know, glean anything about what our day-to-day life was like. And Viv, which is weird because one of Viv's claims is that like we weren't going out that long when I told her I loved her, but it was like we started going out in September, November, January. By December, I guess November, December. By December, she was calling me daddy and asking me like what I wanted for Christmas and vice versa. Like we were dating, you know, like we had been dating since the beginning, but like since September, but like we had been having sex for all summer. and then she moves in February, March, or April, and then we're together for about a month, and she moved out. Like, and that's the person that was around the longest, and her claims are the craziest. You know, like they are the least in touch with reality, including stuff that like physically is impossible.
Just
Like,
people being in a place that doesn't make sense, or just like
yeah,
time not making
like I
sense.
think she made her accusations in a world without email. You know, like it's just like, yeah, you forced me to move in with you, and it's like here we have all the emails, like her excitedly talking about where she's going to put her stuff and what she's going to be up to, and redecorating the living room. And Mandy and I are in Montreal while she moves in.
Mhm.
It's just it's
You're not there like
I
overseeing it. Like
yeah,
she was autonomous. It's not like you were somehow controlling the situation.
yeah, like there's and when you ask people online, even to just give a hypothesis of how this could be true, like what could I have been doing to make this happen, they don't come up with anything. There's a videotape of Viv's deposition where, like, you know, my lawyer's like, so he forced you to move in with him, how? Well, he talked to me on the phone, and then when I bring up reasons why I might be hesitant to move in, he would say why he thought those reasons weren't that important or very good, and then I decided to move in. So it was like, so he convinced you to move in? Is that one way to put it? She's like, maybe, you know, like it's just the most like there's just a level of lying where I don't know how to turn my brain inside out and expose it to the internet so they can just look at the level of lying that has to be true in order for any of this to make sense. And it's super frustrating as a human being to just be like staring right at the fucking tape and be like, how could anyone anywhere believe this? You know, it's, but yeah, and then every single other person was like, yeah, this is the people who saw our life together consistently were like, yeah, like this doesn't,
Yeah. Well,
no.
especially when you have so many other people moving in. Like Michelle, you obviously were doing something, but then as the relationship grew, you moved in eventually. And you weren't forced to move in somehow. You didn't like withhold things or try to, you
No,
know.
it was a very welcoming environment. Mandy and I spent a couple weeks. We moved into one place, and then Mandy and I spent a couple weeks, and we were looking at apartments downtown. And Mandy finally found the place, and we all moved, and it was fun and gentle and nice.
I mean, both of Mandy's dogs, you were there when she got both of them. Was
Yeah,
it Drac? Yeah, I mean,
I took her to
like,
the SPCA to get tracks.
like there isn't another person. You understand? Like there wasn't some confidant in Mandy's life that she was like, okay, this is what's really going on. Like
Mhm.
this was
Yeah.
everything.
You were all part of the process, like you were saying before. Like you weren't showing them like these threats. You weren't the only source of information. Like all three of you, or all of the people involved, were all
Yeah, it was like a
working together.
collaborative
Yeah.
life, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like other roommates. Like we had like 4 or 5 other roommates. They like in and out. There was other people on the show. There were people, Mandy's coworker. Like there's nobody like who was around who can like pretend that it wasn't that this dynamic that Mandy's describing existed. You know, like it, which is one reason it's the only saving grace of like the only reason I'm okay, like relatively mentally okay right now is because at least I can walk out my door and in LA and talk to people and they know this is, you know, this is bullshit. But like, you know, it prevents a lot of things from happening. There are a lot of really bad effects.
Yeah.
But the people who are really in our lives have not abandoned me, you know. And it look, the flip side of that is Mandy went back to Canada, isn't friends with any of her old friends, and now is dating a guy from the internet harassment mob that she was complaining about for 10 years. Like she has completely given up on her offline life, essentially. Now, part of that is her illness, and I don't want to demonize her for being sick, but like she's in very real sense divorced herself from her real life day to day, because the people, including her family, who know her in real life are like, this is dodgy as shit what you're doing.
So you mentioned just like the physical illness and all that, but there's also the the issue of, you talked about Hannah and Jennifer being kind of less known, but maybe it was Jennifer actually. I have to you'll have to back me up and know because you know better than I. Was it Jennifer that said she also had BPD whenever Mandy talked about it,
Yeah,
or yeah?
Jennifer said she had BPD. Yeah,
So that might be, potentially part of some of this, because
yeah.
that
There's
leads to
also,
these kinds of things.
this is a weird thing, is that Mandy's claiming that I was gaslighting her by saying she had BPD, claiming she doesn't have it, which she could be re-diagnosed, fine, but like I that was the best information I had. And she must have known that, because we just had to go through the process, the technical process, where you get deposed, you get asked questions in the Canadian court on Zoom by the lawyers, and then the lawyers can ask for a finding. That is, they ask for the documents that back up what you say. So the lawyer says, "Oh, well, you claimed, Mandy had borderline personality disorder." I'm like, "Yeah, Mandy claimed it. Like, I believe she had said she had asthma. I believe, well, you know what I mean, like." And so he's like, "Well, you don't have any proof?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I have all the fucking emails, where she's like, she's explaining that she has it and giving me links to articles about it. She's explaining a thing that she did during filming of I Hit It With My Axe, which was a little bit scary to everybody, but she was trying to be like, I'm sorry, and explain it in terms of BPD, and getting treated with a treatment that is only prescribed for BPD, which is like, it's dialectical or cognitive behavioral therapy. The one that's, it's a BPD specific therapy that she underwent at great cost for a year. Like, and then describing how she was telling a doctor in Canada that she had BPD, and they said, "Oh, you seem like you're a little bit better right now." Like, it's like she forgot her life, or like,
Or is just omitting it,
I guess
basically.
for me, these things where a person is obviously lying are super significant, because it shows that the person can't be trusted. But I honestly think for a lot of people online, like, anything that a person does can be excused by trauma and mental illness. There's like literally no thing that Mandy could ever do that would be so bad or wrong that it could be excused, that couldn't just be excused. Well, she's traumatized, so she'll do this horrible thing. But it's like, it's kind of a catch-22. At what point does a person become, if two people are saying opposite things, and one of them is caught lying all the time, and one of them you can't even prove single thing that they said was ever wrong, or at least, like a lie, why are we deciding that one person is reliable? And why is Michelle lying? Like, you ask people that and it shuts them up real quick. Like, if you want to ever end a conversation about any of these accusations, you go, why do you think Michelle is lying?
Yeah. And then provide, of
And all the
course,
other girls.
that she's not, like, as a lot of people were claiming initially, she's obviously not real, or people would be like, Zach, how many logins do you have? Stuff like that. Because that was a pretty common thing I saw. And at first, you had said that you were kind of like you were shocked at it. You're like, are these people trolling me? Are
Like,
they?
how, like, what kind of, like, yeah, again, super villain do you think this guy is? He's got all these different little personalities, just dozens of them, all lined up to argue different points, and with their own little backstories, and
Or that he's like fooling you somehow. He's like, hey, could you like write your name and the date and say that you signed a legal affidavit and then take a photo and put it. He's not somehow like conning or convincing you people into this. But that's what a lot of people seem to have said is what's happening, which is just crazy. Um,
I mean, I think the answer is that they honestly don't think about it that hard.
hmm,
They I think about it the way that you might think about, someone obviously shitty, right? Like if someone said, like, I don't know, like someone said Hitler, Hitler technically won the whatever election, like he didn't actually, like he wasn't lying about about the front. Like it's a minor detail because he's Hitler, and I think that people don't want to think about the implications of what they're saying because they want to just sort of. That's why Mandy leans so hard into the online stuff with the gamers, because I think she knew that she could effectively just paint me as like such a monster that no details mattered. Um, and that has been effective, like whenever you ask, like people will run away from a discussion, but they don't change their mind.
So
Like Michelle's been on Reddit, like, and they just will not confront her. You know what I mean? Like Michelle's a woman. You're talking about believing women. Like
except for
why
the
did
women that
yeah.
are on Zach's side because we don't like Zach.
Or they try to just say, well, anybody who is whatever, they try to redirect it to Zach and be like, stop it, Zach. And you're like, no, I'm not Zach. You're not Zach. It's a fairly basic concept, but it seems like they don't want to have that fight,
It's
so they try to.
a weird little while of like constantly having to explain I'm an actual person.
Yeah. It's got to be I don't know.
I mean,
I've
but it's
experienced
been
it a
like
little
that.
bit.
It's been like that all along because the most kind of popular way to attack before any of this Mandy shit, the most popular way to deal with the like the popularity of old school gaming within a little niche crowd against what people think you should be playing was the like just complaints about diversity. And it was like, yeah, I don't know what that means. Like there's nothing in like nobody at my game table, which is the most diverse game table that had been filmed ever at that point, like is complaining about they feel like about orcs being killed at the table, and it's like the ability of people to just they don't want to deal with the actual people they're supposedly defending, like they don't want to, they're not, they want, they're very selective. They're cherry pick the people that count as women, that count as women of color, that count as diverse, that count as queer, because they want whatever their point is to be in line with that point of view rather than those actual humans that they might have to actually listen to and have their own opinions. It's how long can you just watch that happen to people in your life and watch those silly arguments without being like, yeah, you guys are morons. How am I supposed to be civil with someone who's denying the existence of the people in my fucking house?
Well, and it ends up like a Hydra head a lot of the time, and what I've seen is somebody will say something, you'll be like, that's wrong, and then all the people that picked it up and were like, no, that's right. Then you have to do that for every single other person, and because when you stop that initial person lying, oftentimes they don't go back and say, hey, anybody repeating this, that was wrong. I did something wrong. Do not repeat this. Like the people who followed what Etten said, whenever he had to say, I did a wrong thing, they didn't go and look at his statement and go, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't repeat that. It just continues to perpetuate.
They also didn't seem to go, wow, if Etten didn't have any evidence about this in court and couldn't defend himself, I'm sure not going to be able to. I better shut up, which is a lack of self-preservation that I find kind of surprising, but they want, people on the internet want to say shit. They want to say shit very badly. Yeah. The idea that there are limits to what you're supposed, what you can say because it starts to hurt people, or that someone like me is even hurtable, or that they might be responsible for hurting is alien to them.
Well, that kind of segues into some of the stuff that RPGPundit said, which is just like, you don't believe in free speech, or you're a hypocrite about it, or you advocate like blackballing and blacklisting and canceling and doxing, all these things, claiming that you're for like pushing people out, or you're fine with like you having free speech but not everybody.
I think that's a good example of somebody relying on popular ideas and phrases rather than talking about specifics. Like I've never, like, if I have one thing, it's like I went to art school for a long time. You know, like the history of free expression and free speech is something that I actually have written about and talked about and studied a lot. And it's like I've never said anything as dumb and simple and boring as I'm for free speech or against free speech. Like there are lots of weeds around that question, and one of them is like the freedom to lie is actually not protected in any, like lying about someone. Like I'm suing people in a lot of jurisdictions in a lot of countries and a lot of time zones. There's like no country, east or west, really, that we think of as like a country where RPG people are coming from, including like Japan, like whatever, like where lying about whether someone committed abuse is not against the law, like no matter what their free speech protections are. Like it's a really, it's like people know the words free speech, but they don't know like what you do with them, or like if you ask someone like what's free speech for, like is it a goal in itself to be able to like call someone a racial slur, or is it in search of a goal? They don't even engage that question. And the fact is like we have free speech for a reason, like to encourage like useful discussion. And so the little rules that Zach has for who Zach talks to are about useful discussions. Like if someone says to me something that is blatantly not true, and I go, you have to either not put that out there because it's a crime, or at least against the law, depending on your jurisdiction, or prove it. Then going, well, I have the right to free speech is like, that's not a good discussion. My rules aren't about what people should be allowed to do by their government. They're about what gets a useful discussion. A discussion where you don't give proof or evidence is not a good discussion. Like if you give something, if something you say is contested and you don't engage the person contesting you and don't give the, you don't move in the direction of more information at that point, you are getting in the way of the thing free speech is for, which is useful discussions about practical things that can help people. And every word I just said out of my mouth is way over Pundit's head. He would never engage any of that. He would just say the words free speech over and over.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of those buzzwords, canceling and gatekeeping and blah, blah. Like, again, in order to do this interview, I had to ask Michelle if she wanted to be in the interview, right? And she's free to say no. And if she had said no, she'd be protecting her own attention from, you know, all the people who want to talk to her, which we all do every day. We decide who we want to engage with. That's not gatekeeping. Deciding like who I like, you know, feel like is productive to talk to is not gatekeeping. But I have a little bit more of an open door policy than most people. My thing was always anyone can start a conversation with me so long as they tell the truth and answer questions, and I will do the same. And that's
Evidently, yeah,
way more
yeah.
open than every other
Most,
genius
yeah, and it's crazy that causes problems. That people are like
yeah,
objecting to that. Like that's a weird thing to be objecting to. The other thing
people
is,
get really embarrassed when you point out that when you the most upset people ever get is you prove they weren't telling the truth with the screen cap. You're like, you weren't telling the truth. You said this day, and then you said that. Rather than, if it's a good person, they will go, okay, you got me, I'm sorry, and then it's over. It's not a draconian, harsh code. They just go, yeah, okay, and you're like, yeah, we all make mistakes, but they hardly ever do that. They go, like, they just find some reason that they're the victim in that situation, you know, and that's because it's embarrassing, and suddenly the conversation online where they just wanted to say shit has stakes, and they don't like that, and you've hurt them in some way that shouldn't matter, isn't real, but they want to see it that way, and so yeah,
that's the way they try to frame it. That was the
yeah, I mean,
crazy thing for me, was like I looked at those comments that he said, and then he gave a link like this is where Zach is for deplatforming and for canceling and for blacklisting, and he also adds doxing onto it. When you read your comment, you're clearly not for like what he's claiming, and it's like he just does not care what people think about what he says. He just says what he
but
feels
also,
like.
again, he's talking in buzzword. Deplatforming means someone has a place where they can talk to a given audience, and then you want to deny them that place. there's literally every human being on earth has wanted that and enacted that in their lives to some point. Like, if you don't want someone, if someone is currently president and you want them impeached, which almost everyone has wanted at least one of the presidents in a lifetime to be impeached, you want them deplatformed. You know, you're not talking about the buzzword, like, but as soon as you stop talking about the buzzword and you start talking about the substance of what the person wants, you know, everybody has seen somebody who like shouldn't have the job they have because they're bad at it, or they're shitty, or they're hurting people by having that job. Like, if you wanted Hitler to stop being chancellor of Germany, you're for deplatforming. Like, deplatforming is a value neutral desire. It's what they don't. People use buzzwords because they don't want to talk about the really important thing, which is telling the truth. Like, everything else is politicizable. Telling the truth isn't. That's why in the presidential campaigns, both sides accuse each other of not telling the truth, because it does not have a political temperature. So by bringing up a buzzword, like, basically all of the buzzwords that Pundit brings up have a meaning to his audience, a right-wing audience, or some libertarian audience, and all the buzzwords that Mandy is bringing up have a meaning to an audience on the left. But at the end of the day, nobody likes lying. And so neither of those sides want to talk about telling the truth and lying. So as soon as you see a buzzword, ask, why don't they want to talk about lying instead? Because that's the real bad thing. That's the real problem that underlies almost all the others. You know, you can't get very far in any of this shit without somebody lying.
Well, what I see is people say like, that's a straw man argument, or like, that's a fallacy. And instead of just saying like, that's something you're saying is wrong, they try to like pin something on it, like they're pinning a disease to your symptoms. It's really
I mean, they can
weird.
be right. At that point, you go,
Yeah,
point to the part that is a straw man, point to the part that is a fallacy. And then at that point, they run away, you know, because they are lying. Like, and that's the one. It's like one of those monster paranoia movies where there's a monster and the person knows there's a monster and no one believes them. And so the whole first half of the movie is all these dumb explanations everyone has for why they're saying there's a monster. Like, oh, you want attention, or you're a narcissist, or you're trying to divide people, or whatever. Like, all of those things, the monster is lying. They don't want to talk about there's a monster in the room and it's called lying. And people don't want, because they know that they've said dishonest things. They know it's embarrassing to be caught lying. And so they're trying to think of any other subject they could talk about instead of lying.
So I guess talking about buzzwords, would you use the term like shield, or like people being used as shields? Is that kind of a buzzword? Because that's a common thing. Like Cavegirl, Scrap Princess, Mandy have all kind of claimed that you used diverse shields to like cover for yourself. Like if somebody was like, you're a transphobe, you're like holding up, okay, I support this trans person. Is shield a buzzword that they use just to like discount that? Or
of course, like how else can you effectively assess someone's real attitude toward trans people other than how the trans people who are like in contact with them assess them? Like, who has more information? You know, like, to use Michelle as a shield. Michelle, what do you think of that?
I find that insulting that, yeah, that, you know, any interactions, whatever relationship we had, like, actually, no, it's just you because you needed like a queer woman of color in your pocket to pull out when someone's talking about that. Like, it's
just
weird.
another way to try to shut you down, it seems like. And just be like,
it's another dehumanizing thing of like, oh, I'm just part of Zach's diversity shield. Whatever friendship and relationship that we've had for years is just because he needs me for that.
Yeah, nobody would put up with Michelle's bullshit for this long just to have a shield. And Squeaky.
Yeah, there's the dog comes with that too.
How did Squeaky's checkup go, by the way?
I could hear her just like screaming from the other room, from the lobby. She does not like when people look at her butt. She's mad at me.
That's the really like that's the interesting part for me is that people like Cavegirl or Scrap Princess. I mean, I know you knew Scrap Princess better than Cavegirl, right? But I mean
Yeah,
that they then
nobody.
claim that they're like a shield when somebody like Michelle or others obviously they're like, no, I'm not a shield. I'm an independent person, and I get brought up because people are attacking me, and Zach happens to be there at the time trying to like defend his friends, the people he cares
Also,
about.
it's just a way not to deal with the person who has more information than you. You know, like every single person, like Morgana, a trans woman, knows way more about me and Mandy than any one of these gamers online. You know, Michelle, a black person, half black, knows more about Mandy and I's relationship than any of these people online. Like Frankie, a Latina woman, knows more about this than anyone online. But they're nerds. They came to a conclusion based on their nerd ideas, and they don't like the idea that someone might be smarter than them or have more information, or that they might have accidentally made a decision based on less than perfect information, and that having to admit that. And they just they see a lot of things as opportunities to say, aha, but you haven't thought of this. It's like,
Yeah, like whenever they were like they looked at everything you did to try to find something. They're like, is he involved in this? Okay, let's scan everything and try to find something problematic. And if there's anything problematic, if Zach was involved, it had to have been Zach. It's the same kind of thing, right? Where
yeah,
they're looking for things.
I'm just on the silliest, pettiest level. Like people who are like, oh, because James put out that game, like Zach had nothing to do with this product because James likes to bait the bear. And I didn't because I wasn't working for him. And then people said, well, of course he did. And then I think a lot of them revised their opinion after time. Like they don't, but they never came out and said, yes, this thing I said isn't true, even though they know it's true, because it's bad messaging. They're not talking about what they think is true or false. They're talking about what they think is good messaging. And when we start doing that, people aren't talking about anything meaningful anymore. It's just propaganda.
Yeah, they're just trying to put up a facade. They're not trying to actually, you know, they're not they're not actually saying what they mean. They're just trying to say what they think will get people on their side, basically.
Yeah, it's every statement becomes
Like an appeal to somebody.
every statement is a pull and a tug of war rather than simple clear statement of accurate. This is why I'm now been like I've done everything wrong a person could do. I've now done according to these people, because anything about me that comes up, they have to either, including contradictory things, like I have to be simultaneously a Machiavellian genius to have controlled all of these things and not left any trail for so long, and a bumbling moron, because that's also a bad thing. Like I have to be both in order, it,
Which is just
because
paradoxical. Just that
yeah, because they
doesn't check
don't want
out.
to make any statement that doesn't play the right role in the tug of war. They're not interested in accurate statements. They're interested in statements that pull the rope in their direction, which you're not going to get the truth out of anyone like that.
Hmm. So like another kind of buzzword that comes up a lot is flying monkey. People will accuse you of being narcissist. Like Skirples was one of the people who uses the words flying monkey quite a bit. But there are others. And they kind of say like, okay, Zach recruits people to go and like act for him, so he's not culpable. And they
If
use the term
someone
flying monkey.
if someone believes Skirples and says what Skirples believes on the internet, they're not a flying monkey. But if someone believes me and says what I think, they are.
Yeah.
Like that's clearly just a buzzword. Again, they're hiding the monster in the room, which is lying. It doesn't matter how many goddamn people repeat what you say. It matters whether it's true.
Yeah. Because you could have 100 people saying, like what you think, and that doesn't mean that,
Yeah, I mean, if we're
yeah.
if having flying monkeys is bad, Mandy has way more flying monkeys than me, obviously. Like, but the thing is like, if she's right, it doesn't matter. Like, what matters is who's telling the fucking truth.
Yeah, because they say like, okay, he's using you directly. Scruples has said to me, he's using like they said to me directly that Zach, you're using me as like a weapon, and you're using my sense of righteousness and justice to like, do what you want to do. That's just not. If that's the case, Mandy clearly has done that to a lot of people. She weaponized lots of people against you directly by appealing to their sense of righteousness, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, undeniably. But it's like they're pointing toward that issue, which is really, it's not what anyone's genuinely upset about. What they're genuinely upset about is whether a sexual assault occurred.
Mhm.
You know, like, did you ask someone to do something on the internet is not a question that is inflaming everyone's passions here. What's inflaming people's passions is sexual fucking assault. And like focusing on shit like that is a way of like avoiding the monster in the room,
Yeah.
lying. Like, how do we talk about anything other than the lie? How do we get pinned down to anything other than the lie? You know, it's
Just comes part and parcel with it. It's that frame of mind is what leads to that kind of thinking.
Yeah.
And you talk about or at least Hannah talked about, and you've also talked about having kind of a similar story where I think a lot of people have trouble understanding. How do I put this? Hannah talked about being like choked and it being not necessarily a consensual thing. That's the way she framed it. Is that just out of nowhere you held up against a wall and choked her, right? But then they don't talk about all the other people that you were involved with. So you obviously had to have discussed consent or discussed these things before. It wasn't like a just out of the blue you asked her and then decided to do something right then and there. You had prior knowledge.
Again, this was not a thing that was portrayed to me as in any way problematic by Hannah the whole time I knew her. You know, like she was like, yeah, choke me when we have sex. Like that was that. That's it. The Canadian judge, when looked at that, and was like, yeah, this is there's a simple question here about whether it was a mistake or not. If it was a mistake, it's not a crime or an assault. You know, like, and the way Zach is framing it in his claim is that we were having this discussion, it was a mistake, and he had no reason to know otherwise. And the way Hannah's described it in her post is that it was something that seemed strange in retrospect after Mandy made her claims to Hannah.
So at the
Like,
time, it wasn't.
it was not.
Yeah.
All I can say is that it was news to me that that was even a thing for Hannah. Like, there was no like, and Hannah's conversations with me for years after were just flirting. Like, I have all the records, flirting, talking about being like slapped and choked and all the things that Hannah was into. It's like, it's an ambush, you know? And it's like, if I have something to apologize for about that, then you could come to me and talk about that. But framing it as a sexual assault is like, I really wanted to choke someone because I knew they didn't like it. Like, I don't know. Again, this is something that Michelle could probably speak to.
Yeah,
It's
that's
like,
what I was gonna say. Is like
I'm not a person who volunteers to do kinky shit. I usually start with I don't even know how to talk about it, but like, it's
you don't just do random stuff. And you can kind of attest to that, Michelle, better than
When
I
Zach and
could
I
ever.
started seeing each other in a sexual way, like there was a lot of discussion about what's okay, like how much is too much, what's like, what are you about boundaries.
Yeah.
And I'm sure working in porn, like people are used to, most people who work in porn are very, they have discussions about boundaries, and that's something. And yeah, when you like something like being choked or slapped, it's, you can't be like, okay, I'm into that, and then it happens. And if you didn't like it, you have to say something about that. You don't just
Well, in a lot of cases,
I mean, I can see reasons why you wouldn't, but Hannah didn't have any of those reasons. Like, Hannah wasn't a person who at that time was like dependent on me for anything. She was just visiting. Like, she wasn't a person. She could have cut off contact at any time. She lived in fucking Ohio. You know, like all the things which would tell you that she might be trying to get out of it, some kind of situation with me. She didn't do. You know, like there were all these levers she could. Then long after this, she decided to move in with us, and we had two beds, and I was like, "Do you want that other bed, or do you want to sleep in our bed?" And she said, "Throw away the other bed. I'll sleep in your bed." Like, the context around this gave me no clue that this was even remotely off, like something that she didn't like. It was something that I truly believe. She's a loyal to Mandy. She heard Mandy's story, and she kind of went back through her mind and tried to like be like, was there anything that looks remotely like this supervillain in my past? And it was
or this
like, well,
person that I'm hearing about. Yeah. I mean, a
Yeah,
lot of that
and
was news to these
When
people.
Mandy spoke to me, like, yeah, she kept trying to get me to go back and kind of like, oh, like, remember when Zach said this? Like, don't you think that was kind of like, that kind of reflects what I'm saying? And like, it just, I didn't bite onto that and be like, oh, actually, yeah, you know what? This doesn't sit right with me. But I'm guessing others did.
yeah, but again, like people try to make this vague, but it's very clear cut. Like the judge is like, yeah, if this went down the way that Zach is describing, it is a mistake, and it is something that like could happen, and there's nothing to complain about here. There's no assault. If it didn't, then it's an assault, and that's what the trial, like what trials are about, like, and people are trying to like mangle that into saying like I admitted to assaulting her, and it's like, no, like I probably choked Hannah every time we had sex, like that was what she liked. And again, if I'm not a supervillain, what's my goal with Hannah? To make her like me and like having sex with me so I can do it again and again. Like, I'm not a complex man in that way. So like I don't pick a random kink and enact it on her. One that I'm in porn. I can do whatever kink I want in movies, and like they will hire people who are into that thing. Like if you look at my thing, like my record, there's not a lot of choking porn in it. Like it's not something that I would voluntarily just do for fun outside of somebody getting something out of it. It's
Mm.
like, but people know it's icky. The whole subject is icky, and people don't want to think about it in that
Yeah,
way.
so they kind of get freaked out. I
Yeah,
mean,
they're
and you talked about
I
consent.
don't know what's going on with your crazy Los
Yeah.
Angeles Hollywood world. I just know you're an asshole. And it's like, no, think about it. Like, you're with someone. It's the second time you've ever hung out. You've had sex already. You're making out. You want this person to like you. You want them in your life. You then prove that you want them in your life because you have them in your life years later by invitation. You then randomly choose a sex act they don't like because you're just so full of what? Rage? Like, like this supervillain has so many. He has a Machiavellian ability to like hold off on showing his dark side, while at the same time just cannot avoid choking someone in public because it's just such a turn on. Like it's all icky. It's icky, and so people don't want to think about it,
Mm.
But
But
it's
you've had a lot of problems with like people that are anti-porn and they don't understand that it's not like a forced thing. Like, you talked about consent and working in porn. You have to talk with the other performers. They maybe record it depending on the scene. Like
yeah,
it's a thing that has guidelines because it's a job. It's not just like, oh, I
yeah,
feel like doing porn. Like you get paid and there's regulations. You have to get
yeah. But
all
I think
kinds of testing
a
and
lot of times the worst people are the people who do understand that stuff, and they go, well, just because you had a kink doesn't mean it's consent. And I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm not describing something where because Hannah had a kink it was consent. It was because we were having a conversation where we were making out, and she was talking about her kinks, and I was like, okay, that is what she is asking for, like. And then 10 years later she described that as not an assault but just like a weird thing,
Mhm.
like. And I don't think that Hannah would go into court and be like, I'm sure I was sexually assaulted. Like, I don't actually think that she would do that. I think she was just trying to write something to back up her friend. But it's, it's, it's,
It's something that people jump on.
it's
Quite.
also a very
That's
difficult position to put them in because, like, let's say they do believe Mandy, but they don't believe that something that dodgy or sketchy happened to them. They're being asked, on the one hand, they don't want to say like, okay, Zach crossed this and this and this line with me. On the other hand, they don't want to put Mandy in a position where they're not backing them up. It's like you can see that as a weird kind of cul-de-sac.
it's yeah, it's a hard
And
thing to deal with.
Hannah had no issue with me and made every fucking choice that she made from Ohio was to get closer to me and Mandy and have sex with us more and be around us more and sleep in our goddamn bed every night. Like this is not something that someone does if you're really afraid of the person or think that whatever happened to you was like a serious assault.
Yeah.
You know, again, from Ohio. She had a lot of other options besides move in with Zach and Mandy. and it was years later. It wasn't, you know what I mean? Like, she wasn't a person who was in a cult. Like, the choices she made afterward don't suggest that this was a very serious issue for her. And yeah, and it
Well,
wasn't
especially because, like you said, she contacted you, afterwards, right? And
constantly. I
so
mean,
it's like,
most of our relationship took place after that happened. Like, I've got pages and pages of just Facebook flirting. It's not just flirting too. She's asking me for advice about her boyfriends and like, oh, I'm kind of kinky and this person isn't, and blah, and what do I do? Or like, it's just like, is a relationship with someone who trusts the person they're talking to. Like, there's no like, she's like, I don't know whether I really like this guy. I don't know what to do. Like, I'm just like, she's treating me like someone who you ask for advice, like someone who you trust.
mhm.
It's the opposite of the person that is, yeah.
But what I've seen is people like, I think Cavegirl was the one who started it, and then Scrap Princess saw what Cavegirl did and your reaction and like your messaging with Scrap, and they all just say like, "Oh, he says he did it, so he's saying he's guilty," and that's not what you said. It just
No,
isn't.
yeah,
Yeah, you just
no,
said
I
something
see.
happened, and you're only just now realizing that they
We're
didn't maybe.
hearing,
Yeah, exactly.
and I also think it's a reframe out of loyalty,
Yeah.
to Mandy. Like, Hannah wants to back Mandy up.
So, do you have any specifics that you remember, Michelle, that like she tried to like specific things? Did she try to kind of recontextualize things that some of the other witnesses on her side said, or the people on her side? Did Mandy try to get you to say the same things, or was it different things that only you saw?
Uh, oh, I'm trying to think of an example. Um,
You said the thing about the
yeah,
face tattoo,
the what?
the face tattoo thing.
Oh, the face tattoo. Yeah, she said that Zach forced her to get her face tattoo. That it was like a human trafficking, like imprint, like branding kind of thing. That he got her to get it, like to like claim her as his. But Mandy and I had been talking for years about getting face tattoos. We both wanted them. We would kind of plan our little face tattoos and talk about it all the time. And one night they went out to a bar and there's a tattoo place open across the street, and he was like, I want to get it tonight. And so they went in and she got her face tattooed and she was happy about it. And now she says it's a sinister thing that she was forced into it, but
Mhm.
you know
Well, I mean, all three of you have that another thing that people online just don't understand. You've got like the piercings, you've got the hair, you've got the tattoos, and a lot of them would be like, I don't like this. This is different. And so then they see her say, I didn't want to do these things, and they go, that's evidence of abuse. But from what you're saying, like, it was part of what you all cared about or
yeah,
wanted to do.
it's just stuff
Yeah.
that we like to do.
Mandy
um
claimed that I forced her to, in her court documents, she said that I forced her to get a mohawk, which I don't know, like,
yeah,
It just doesn't make any sense to
it's
you.
like, I
You
don't
don't
know.
even.
Mandy just sat around all day taking selfies of herself. Like, that was her job essentially. Like, with her mohawk, like dyeing it and playing with it, and she did lots of things with her hair that had nothing. It was just, it's so weird. Again, the opposite of the person we knew. Like,
Mhm. But I remember reading like, I think it might have been some article where somebody came and played with your group, and they talked about how like some of your members were literally just tattooing each other casually, or you bought a tattoo gun, or you
yeah.
wanted to get a tattoo gun to.
One of Mandy's fans got us a tattoo machine because Mandy wanted me to be able to tattoo us.
And I mean that there's tattoos on Zach that were done by you, right?
Yeah, and there's tattoos on
From
Mandy
that exact
done by
thing. Yeah.
done by me too. Yeah.
So it's not a thing where somehow like he would separate her and like go and like have it forcibly done. It was like something that didn't just happen somewhere else. No, it happened in the home by trusted people. It's like just doesn't check out.
yeah, and Vanessa Vaselka, who wrote one of those articles, uh, is a witness now on my side. Like, she wrote a statement.
Mhm.
She's like, yeah, this doesn't add up. You
Mhm.
know.
Well, because when you see that firsthand, you're like, okay, now she's gonna change it. I mean, you can't just change stuff like that when you have people in the same room seeing it. I mean, like you said, then you have a witness that says, no, Zach wasn't like holding somebody down and tattooing them.
He
Like,
like tied her to a chair and shaved a mohawk and
yeah, or like threatened her, like if you don't get a mohawk, I'll do X. Like it was something that she cared about, and it was part of her personality. It wasn't like an extension of Zach somehow.
Yeah, it's like no one who knew her at the time could possibly suggest that any aspect of Mandy Morbid's appearance was not something Mandy Morbid would fight you if you had a problem with it. You know, like she, she's describing everything as someone else's fault.
yeah,
Like all
she also said like you decided what colors she was allowed to wear. That you didn't allow her to wear like earth tones and brown. She didn't like that stuff. She didn't like it.
like literally my wife is going, what do you think of this? Like, what do you think of this outfit? And I would say, like anyone else, like I'd be like, oh, I like that one better than that one. And then that turns into that because in her mind, she can do it. You know, she can get away with saying that and people will believe her because it sounds like bad boyfriend stories on Twitter,
Mm.
you know? And they go, oh, I know someone like that. Of course, you know someone like that. She's picking cliches to repeat, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's one of the most telling things is everyone going, oh my God, this sounds so much like my own abuser. It's like, yeah, she's describing a specific real person like she's a bad screenwriter, you know, like writing cliched characters in a thing that didn't happen.
Or she's like sourcing like other friends or other stories of abuse and kind of pulling things out of those and saying, okay, I'm going to attach these to Zach. And so that's why it reads as an abuser because it's built out of other abusers.
Yeah, and I don't even think she's actually talking to real friends because they sound just so much like the internet. Like one just real and unfortunate fact of being as sick as Mandy is that she had less and less contact with real life and more contact with just internet discourse, you know? And
Mm.
so that's why her her way she's talking is full of internet buzzwords and full of arguments that the RPG internet would make because they were the people who paid the most articulate attention to her. I mean, her porn fans would talk to her, but they just say, "Ooh, I like your tits," you know. Whereas the RPG people like could have a conversation with Mandy about something she cared about, and so she eventually kind of glommed on. She became closer and closer to them, uh, and further from her people in real life. And like this girl Shu Skogan, or I don't know what Shu's gender situation is like complicated. Like Shu says that their pronouns are mermaid. I can't remember. I'm sorry, but Shu Mandy became very close to Shu. Shu really led the charge to push me out of the old school games and like really like was like we have to believe Mandy. And then Shu admitted that she didn't believe what Mandy said. And Shu and Mandy had a big argument and aren't friends anymore.
So
But
it's just
it was
using Mandy's story as a tool to get what she wanted,
yeah,
maybe.
and literally one of the only people who of all of that scene that ever met Mandy in real life, and it was only after the fact. You know, it was like her real life connection to these people was very slim. But you know, and once it became real, it's not tenable. Like her, you know, she didn't have really an ability. I don't know. I
So
mean, I don't know what she's like now. It's been 3 years, but it's all really weird.
so it's kind of like as time went on, it started out as she could model, she could do porn, she was mobile enough to do what she wanted. And then as she got sicker, then she got her diagnosis. Like, okay, now let's bring people to the house to do D&D. Now let's, you know, make it more accessible for her. And then as time went on, like, remember the one video I saw that was the I Hit It With My Axe reunion panel that Stacey Delferano did,
Yeah.
was like it was on, I think, Hangouts, and you could see Michelle and Mandy laying in front of the camera, and you were on a separate camera. These are in
Yeah.
different places,
Right.
but at that point, like it became more and more digital and more like not able to do stuff in real life. And eventually, like you said, it's led to only online friends at this point.
Yeah, and or at least people that Mandy met through that network. And these are literally people that she had nothing but contempt for in 2014 and 15. They were pissing her off, you know, they were like it's bizarre.
Well, what she told me is she said, I'm going to go to these people because I know they're going to side with me over Zach. They don't like Zach.
It wasn't like these are the people I care about. It's like these are the people who will get
Who
my
will
goals done. Yeah.
decide? Yeah.
Yeah, in court, that what Michelle just said is not hearsay. It's called a verbal act, or statement of intent.
Oh, okay.
If you say, "I'm going to go shoot up a police station," and I hear you say it, and I tell the court, that's not hearsay. That is me reporting the statement of intent to commit a crime. Like, she told Michelle she was trying to ruin
It's
my
not
life.
it's not you heard that I said that. It's you heard me say it.
Yeah, I mean, it's still it is what we call hearsay exception in court,
Okay.
stating to a third party that you're going to go do something illegal. But yeah, like Mandy knew it, like, and that's why she pitched her vocabulary, her audience, her way of talking toward those people, which is why those people have been the one who led the charge to destroy my life. The people in the art world and even in the people in the porn world were like, they did not respond to her. You know, she pointed it at specific people in the RPG scene because she knew it would set off a chain reaction, and it did.
So there's no doubt that she was the author. Nobody's saying, other people helped her or somebody else wrote her post. It's definitely, or it seems
I
likely that it was her.
oh,
Completely.
she wrote it. She claims to have wrote it. I think it's also likely that some people like Stacey Delorfano or Shu like looked at her post and talked to her about it and maybe suggested some things before it actually went live because Stacey knew it was coming up. Stacey Delorfano was in charge of PR for the company Lamentations of the Flame Princess, my publisher, when this began in secret. So Stacey openly worked for them. Mandy was friends with Stacey, and Mandy told Stacey, had begun the summer before. So this all happened February 2019. So the summer of 2018, Mandy began lying to people who were going to go to Gen Con. And so there were some weird interactions with people at Gen Con. I didn't really understand them at the time. So she began lying to people around then. She began smearing me online, like, oh, my abusive ex, just vague shit. That summer in summer 2018. So Stacey knew that Mandy was gonna do something. Stacey, this has been told to me by James Radji at LOTFP. Stacey told James something's coming in January, February. I'm gonna quit before it happens. Stacey quit working at LOTFP. Then Mandy published her statement. So this was calculated. This was thought up in advance.
She didn't just wake up one morning or wake up and spend a week like writing, and it's more like she spent a protracted period of time, like.
Also, the way I heard it from her family is that the post that she first put that post up in private, as something like to a private audience, and it was because
a private group
that her therapist recommended that she do. And everybody was like, they didn't say that your therapist recommended you put it on the internet. And she didn't
more
ask
like
her,
talk about it in person, not like
talk about it, yada yada. So she wrote it for her therapist, and then she published it to a small group of people on Facebook. And then she made a decision to publish it. Again, I think probably Shu was wanting to use it to push me out because Shu is a scary person, and somebody who's also kind of not very consistent thinker, not like real straight and direct, and doesn't like being asked for questions or evidence or shit like that, and doesn't like the influence of somebody who's always asking for proof. And so eventually, it kind of developed from there. Now, all of that could be fake because I all heard it from secondhand sources. So I heard about the thing with Stacey from James. I heard about like the stuff about Shu is secondhand. Like look from, I forget, like her Discord. I can't remember, but like that's basically the story that I could piece together.
So, Michelle, you had said like specifically like private groups and things. You would put in some Reddit posts. People would ask you like, "Do you have proof that Mandy said that she wanted to destroy Zach?" And they're like, "Do you have screenshots?" And you were like, "No, it was just girl talk." Like, do you have screenshots? Do you have proof? Like, so you were in some of those groups, or like you talked to her privately.
Well, her intent that she told me, like, that was in person. I'd gone to see her in Montreal when we were hanging out, and She had spoken.
So that wasn't over digital.
She had a private group, like a support group, just because I like mainly due to her illness on Facebook, where at first she was like, well, I'm not feeling good and I'm in another hospital, and I always like depended on Zach, like when I was feeling sick and I needed a group of people because I don't want it to be Zach anymore. And it kind of like evolved more into a like, well, Zach was abusive, he did this and this, but like first it was just a like, I don't want to be reliant on him anymore, we're not together. And then her
It changed.
skew more and more towards telling little tales of things that he did that were wrong.
And all this is harder to record or find because it's like in private groups, right?
Yeah, it's a private Facebook group. I actually like ended up leaving that group eventually because I was like, like these posts are getting weird and like kind of.
You didn't really want to be party to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like stuff I didn't really agree with, but I was like, I don't know, give her a space to talk, like I guess think things through out loud. But
I mean, there's not much. I mean, I get what you're saying.
I thought like, maybe like she would figure it out, like as she's like going through things in her head and just like working through the breakup and stuff, like she would finally come to terms with the fact that it was a breakup and things weren't always perfect, but she took in another direction.
It was a complicated relationship. It wasn't as simple,
The model where one person's speech is essentially therapeutic for them, and yet it isn't private or in a therapy session, and so every claim that they make is taken seriously and acted on, is a good model to explain all of this shit since 2009. Like, people just talk because they have a need to say those things. And then other people, their friends, take them seriously and act on them. And that hurts other people because they have been believed in saying something that's not, strictly speaking, true. And then it echoes out. And then the original person is like, well, I didn't mean to cause any harm. I was just saying my feelings. And then suddenly everyone's having a conversation about true and false when they wanted when really what they wanted to do is talk about their feelings. And you can see so many conflicts are like this, like so many things where people in the game scene decided they didn't like me. It was because somebody would essentially talk about their feelings, and in the course of that, they would say something that was not strictly speaking true and shouldn't be spread. And I'd go, hey, don't say this about this person. It's not accurate. It's not respectful of them. And they would go, well, I don't have responsibility to them. I'm just saying my feelings in public where that can be Googled and taken seriously. It's like, it's not a solved problem for the entire internet, like the desire of people to use the internet as a sort of giant therapy space versus the desire of other people to not be lied about in ways that fuck up their lives.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's also the problem of people just like putting images or putting words or putting things and having no control over who takes them and who looks at them and who uses them because they don't take those measures. Yeah, that is a difficult problem. Kind of related to that, you're talking about like this is a private group thing. One of the allegations against you, Zach, that Skirple said, and I'm sure other people have repeated, is you had like a secret group. You had like an inner circle, like on G Plus, where it was all private and it was all secret and hidden for some nefarious reason.
Yeah, it's interesting because like Skirples hangs out in the OSR, the old school gaming community, but Skirple is a relative newcomer compared to the people who were there before. And the funny thing about it is all those people who were there before would immediately go, yeah, that's bullshit, Skirples, because they had heard it when they themselves, Patrick Stuart or Scrap Princess, or these people who were supposedly close to me, were the people who were being accused of being part of a secret group by people outside the OSR. So it sort of skipped the generation where like all the people who were there, like, which is, the people who I've worked with, or, like hundreds of people, like Ramanan Savanjaran, or like all the random names in the OSR, they know that these are things that were made up by people outside of that scene, because they were just like, how could so many people agree with Zach? Like, it was just like, no, I would put it on my Google Plus that somebody said something stupid, which is what everyone does all the time on the internet, is point to other people saying stupid things. Like, that's what most of Twitter is going, this person says something stupid, right?
Mhm.
So, and so there's a conspiracy theory created by Etten and his friends. I sued Etten. I successfully sued Etten, remember, which included this element that I had some secret harassment group. All the people who would have been part of that secret harassment group now like turned on me for other reasons because of Mandy. Like, if they were going to be like, I was part of a secret harassment group, they would have said so by now. Like, there's literally, but the people who came along later, like Skirples, they just read every accusation online. They don't have the context of the people that they actually pal around with and know very well. Like, they're not saying like, Skirples and Patrick don't have a relationship where Patrick can be like, yeah, that one's pretty much bullshit. Like, so you see that sort of newer post Discord generation of the OSR, they're repeating accusations that were like thoroughly debunked years ago, because they don't really have they don't have any background to parse it, and they don't do research, and they don't ask questions.
Well, now that platform is gone as well, so a lot of that information like can't really be found or can't really be
It can be
contextualized.
found because
Well, you saved it, but you know what I mean. A lot of people will then claim, "Oh, well, you only saved the things that you wanted to say." Of course, the normal stuff of just complete lunacy.
Yeah, but it's like it should be suspicious that 10 years of harassment, no one recorded a single moment of me harassing anyone or suggesting
Yeah.
that anyone be
Nobody
harassed.
like walked in on a terrible thing happening and it's like, "Ooh, I should like do something."
It's all text. It's all done by typing. Like 10 years of me harassing everyone in the RPG scene and nobody managed to find any of it by now. Like, not a and I piss off everyone, right? Like, everyone's mad at me. I piss off everyone around me. Not a single person managed to go snip screenshot, right? And yet I have all these screenshots of people blatantly getting caught lying. Like, I have a record. Like, I'm literally the level, like you have to be a Machiavellian genius to think if I'm being harassed online, I record it. Like, how does this hold water to anyone? Like, it's unimaginably fucked up. But when you actually drill down, like in the few times when you see people having conversations with each other and they think that you're not watching, what they really say is, it was mostly his tone. Like, he didn't really do anything wrong. It was just his tone made me think it. And it's like, you are making a moral judgment about crimes based on someone's tone. Meanwhile,
Also,
you have
tone is really easy to detect in text, as everybody knows.
yeah, it's like
Well,
it's
and
like
I've seen people do it based on your hair and other things like that. Just like you can tell he's an asshole. Look at his hair. That kind of
my
thing.
hair is so good,
I know, and that's the part that
They
makes me that they hate it, and then they're like, I'm gonna extrapolate like his tone or the way he presents or any of these things and extrapolate he's a bad person from that. It just doesn't,
I mean,
like you said, it shouldn't hold water.
yeah, I mean, those people should be dismissed right away. I mean, that was the thing, is like, once somebody says something that silly, they shouldn't be believed about anything anymore. Like, they need to get therapy until they don't say things like that to other adults in public. Like,
Mm.
if you imagine every single thing that is said in the RPG space in public is said in a bar, that would be like everyone would be dead by now. Like, just glasses in the, like, it's like
Yeah,
they're only saying these things because they know that they are like they're being shitty because they know that they can escape consequences. And I was the guy who was like, no, I'm going to remember your name. I'm going to remember what you said. I'm going to remember that you didn't have proof. I remember that you were asked. And I'm going to treat you like the person who did the bad thing that you did forever until
and
you fix that. And they hated
yeah,
that.
well, then they try to turn that into a negative quality instead of a positive, and people like Olivia Hill and Patrick Stewart would go, he's like stalking and harassing people because he's keeping track, like he's keeping tabs. I'm like, no, like he's clearly said that he's keeping tabs because they haven't fixed the things that they've done wrong, and they just continue to do more wrong things.
Yeah,
You've got
they're
to stay
hurting people.
watching. Yeah,
Like, Olivia Hill was accused of abuse by her partner, right? Like, by, like, Olivia Hill lied through her teeth about 100 things that got recorded. and there have been no real consequences for any of that. If the consequence can't even be I block you, and when your name comes up, I point out you did a bad thing, like what the fuck is the world coming to? You know, like we all know these things happen. They're recorded and proved. You know, like they're not little things. It's like, you know, there's the story of Cassandra where like Cassandra predicts what's going to happen, but no one believes her. Like I said, like I'm like, these people are doing shitty things. Bad things are going to come from it. And now everyone complains all day about the dynamic of the internet, and especially the online game scene, about people don't listen to each other and the arguments go nowhere and they're circular and all kinds of shitty people get through, including a bunch of people that I specifically called out by name are abusive, like 15 of them at last count, some 20.
Yeah.
You
Well, it
know,
started off
and
as
it's
like a
like,
D8 table, and it just kept going up and up.
yeah, it's like I said all these things would happen if you let people lie without, or say things they haven't fact checked without.
Well, and somebody like Olivia Hill would say absurd stuff. She'd be like, the
Oh
back
yeah,
of Vornheim had like, you know, all these like hate comments, and you were like,
yeah. I mean, literally, you have my books on your shelf,
yes, and there's
clearly, right? And
yeah,
she said that all of my books were the back of all my books have or the back of my books
like the
have,
names of detractors, so people could harass
they have
stuff like that.
like my victims like complain. It's like that's so easy to check and so obviously not true. And I don't understand what mental hoops people jump through to go, well, this is a trusted person, I'm gonna believe what they say,
Mhm.
and you know I'm gonna buy their bullshit, even though it's been like it. I think it's just that they're walled off. I think they've been walled off from the people who fact check them for a long time. So
You talked about suing Etten, and
yeah,
people oftentimes People oftentimes kind of say, "Oh, the only reason you were able to sue Etten is because people like Gus L, Dungeon of Signs, or Robert Bull will say like he's overly litigious and he's using like the legal systems in Canada or Australia to his benefit," um, which I find interesting.
well, I'm suing in the U.S. I'm suing where the fucking people
I know,
live.
but they like, but I mean, the one you won, oh, it's from Australia. That must mean you were somehow cheating the system, and it's like,
I think the thing to say about that, with the takeaway of that, is I won that one so quickly because Etten is the guy who's all of his shit is about these online accusations. He was the number one most active person complaining saying that I harass people online. That was his main thing. Of all the people on the internet, he's the one he kept every screenshot that there was, trying to claim it was something significant. He had all the links. He wrote all the viral posts. Like he was the big super spreader of that stuff. The fact that he got sued, had no evidence, didn't go to court, proves that all that shit is not true. And he could have afforded to go to court because he raised money to pay his legal fees, like easily, just by being like Zach, saying my name. And anybody can raise legal fees by saying my name, right?
mhm.
So it's not true, you know, like that's what the takeaway there. Hold on, let me dispense with this person. 1 second.
So you said you were in Canada.
Yeah.
So does it feel like being in Canada, like based on what you know, like, oh, Zach is only suing Mandy in Canada for like a benefit? 'Cause from what I heard from him before, it's more like he got told that it would be quicker than suing in the
Yeah.
U.S.
I mean, that makes sense. If someone was suing me right now, I'd expect them to sue me in Canada. It seems like it would make things just more difficult for something if it was in the US. Like, does that mean I have to go to the US? Like,
Well, and I think it also boils down to people
do
just
do
not
I need an
actually knowing.
American lawyer? Like,
Yeah, that's
All
the
right,
crazy part to me.
what
Also,
were you guys?
oh, I was just asking her, like, she's in Canada, you know, the idea that like somehow it's suing there is different than suing here. It's like, especially because most of your court cases now, or most of your stuff now, is like has to be online. You can't do stuff in person. Even if you were suing in LA, you can't go to a court in LA necessarily,
yeah.
right? Because of
If
COVID.
if you're suing in LA, does that mean that people have to come from wherever they are to LA and they have to get an American lawyer and they, like, yeah, you sue people where they are? Thank
Yeah, I mean, it's like they're just every detail. There's a real obsession with something that you know that everyone else doesn't, right? Or that no one else has a detail that you've found. Like, so when you're suing a bunch of people over like a bunch of people who all did something shitty, there's a tremendous amount of paper and details and documents generated, right? Which means that none of these people really know very much. So as soon as they get hold of any piece of information, they assume that it's sinister because look, aha, I found something, I know something, and I'm a nerd, and I want to tell you the secret piece of information that I know. And it's like, yeah, I sued Etten in Canada. Like, would you dream of suing Etten in the United States, convincing Etten that like, and his lawyer that, and the Canadian, or the, that, you know, you have jurisdiction over Etten, getting Etten to fly to the US and then charge, you know, Etten loses and owes you money and gets him to pay the US? Like, no, like you go to, you know, sue him where he is. Like Etten was the person who was sort of the super spreader of the online accusations. And so I knew that it was, those things are utter bullshit. They aren't even matters of interpretation. And Etten is blatantly, Etten is not someone who, as far as I know, has a mental illness contributing to his perception of events. Etten is somebody who simply lies. Like, I knew that from the beginning. So I knew that as soon as, like, and I knew the online accusations have no substance. And so I knew that that would be easy. And that would be the first thing to do. And everybody, and I'm suing everywhere else that I'm supposed to sue, like
I'll be right back.
and none of the people who have said that, like none of the people who said, oh, I can't believe Zach wrote his statement having a lawyer, none of those people have come back and said, okay, I now admit Zach had a lawyer. None of the people who said, oh, I can't believe, like Zach's not going to sue anyone, he knows he'd lose, or have come back and said, okay, I was not, he clearly is going to sue people.
Well, like Cavegirl was like, who are you going to sue? Everybody? And you're like, yes, I'm going to sue everybody.
I didn't say I was going to sue everybody.
Well, but you said as long as you can, like you're going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to do what I have to do to fix the problem, and if that, like that shouldn't require suing everyone. At a certain point, it should become obvious that like this is bullshit, even to the worst actors. But like, what else are you supposed to fucking do?
Especially because you took all the routes beforehand. People will be like, he's overly litigious. People will like claim that you're like, you jump to litigation first and you have to say no.
No, I spent 10 years trying to talk to these people. I would always say, you can always contact me. You can always email me. Like, tell me what you think I did, and we will have a conversation. I've posted like blog entries like that within the last year, I think. Like, the door has always been open to do something else, but it's like, these are people who know that they're full of shit, but really, really like the shit that they're full of.
That's one that I see a lot as well. Is like I see goons like Emmy, Joe Slowboat. Skirples is not a goon. Was that person a 4chan? Not sure. Skirples.
Skirples is a 4chan person, yeah.
And then I see like people write articles or like long Twitter posts like Tegaminis or however you pronounce that, all just claim you're litigious. And it's like, it's been pretty clear from the offset that you've taken like a lot of effort to not be litigious and just talk to them.
Yeah, well, Mandy told me twice to sue, like over all of this shit years ago. And I have the emails where she asks me to do it. I had to produce them again because of discovery in the Canadian case. Mandy was the one who was like, just sue these assholes, like this harassment group. And I said, look, Mandy, like, I have the record of when I called up AVO, which was at the time was a legal advice service. And I said, look, here's my case, yada, yada, yada. And they're like, this will be hard because it's hard to prove damages, And I was like, okay. And I did that twice at Mandy's behest because she was so sick of it that she wanted me to sue. So like, number one, it's Mandy's idea. Number two, it's almost as if she heard that and was like, well, I'll give him a reason to sue. So now I can claim damages super easily, like I lost literally everything. So it's like, number one, it wasn't my idea. Number two, I tried for months. Like, remember, this happened February 2019. February, I kept talking to Mandy's sister and her dad, trying to deal with Mandy, talking to everybody I knew that knew her that might be able to get through to her. February, nothing. March, nothing. April, nothing. May, nothing. June or July, I'm like, there's like I have tried everything to like talk to her or the community, and I was cut off in every way. And it's like, you have to, then you're suing people. There isn't a choice. What they want, what they're trying to say is, again, just like go away.
Yeah.
Just
Well,
stop telling us we're wrong.
From that time period, I mean, you would appear in comments all over the place saying it's not true and giving details like once you put out a statement eventually, and like had to say, okay, we have to like do a legal thing. But even before that, you put out a statement, you'd have to go and tell people. And you had like Michelle, you went out and were like telling people, here's the statement.
And then he puts out a statement and people are like, look at that, he did it, him trying to defend himself, he must have done something wrong, getting all defensive, like
Yeah.
And before he said anything, because he was speaking with a lawyer, they were like, oh, he's not saying anything, like that looks pretty guilty, like
Yeah. Damned if you do, damned if you don't, basically.
Yeah,
and mods like removing your posts, and
there's literally nothing I could possibly do that they wouldn't have a take on, and there's no proof they could be confronted with that they would acknowledge actually occurred. You know, the whole thing of, this is another layer to it, which is the whole thing of, number one, that I'm litigious. Like, okay, I'm just gonna list the personality traits that I most popularly have to have. Litigious, which we've talked about. I'm allegedly rich, which I'm not. Michelle gave me money earlier this year. Like I am surviving because my, like, the people who love me know this is bullshit and they're supporting me. That's it. You know, that I have a trust fund, that I ask too many questions and I'm condescending and I'm a know-it-all, and that I undermine people. That is literally a list of anti-Semitic stereotypes. Like, I don't think anyone is sitting there going, I hate Jews, like, therefore I hate Zach. I think, though, that they have, like, I argue all the time. I talk with my hands. Like, you're listing things that are like stereotypes about Jewish people and like complaining that I'm not, like, it's like, well,
and they also tie this
really,
stuff like they tie this stuff like trust fund, or the fact that like you're constantly trying to like bring up things, like they always claim you sea lion by like always trying to like ask questions. And they're like, no, it's bad faith, these questions he's asking. But that's them like trying to tie you to like the right, or like be like, they claim all your Trumpian tactics. I've seen people directly say stuff like that.
Yeah, and you see me called a communist. It's like, they're just buzzwords. Like, these are all, like, these words don't have meaning to them, and if you in any way you ask for details, they just fall apart, scream, and run away, because they want to talk on the internet. They don't want to be taken seriously unless it's just in the sense of being agreed with. Yeah. Like, that's it. It goes for every single fucking thing they've ever done to be shitty on the internet. Is like, why are you taking what I say? Again, I will remind you, in one of my lawsuits, literally the defense that the guy's attempting to do is, my tweets don't mean anything. I just say shit. Now, they're public. I have thousands of followers. They were read, believed, and repeated by those followers and acted on. But I just say shit on my Twitter. They're just momentary thoughts. Like, I don't fundamentally believe in the right of someone to just momentarily defame, smear, trash, or libel somebody. Like, it's like, and neither does any law in any of the countries these dipshits live in. Like, and in a lot of places, it's a fucking crime. It's not just a civil offense, you know? And that's weird that nobody's figured that out. Like, some of them are like, yeah, like cops. Like, it's, but no, they want to talk, you know?
So Michelle, you kind of have a limited online presence now, and you've kind of always, you weren't like super crazy, like posting and doing all these. So do you have the same kind of reaction that Zach does, where you're like, why are these people just saying stuff?
Yeah, like just like going on, like when I was posting on Reddit, like just like why do you have an opinion? Like, who are you? Like, do I know you? Like, people, I think like two people are like, oh, like what a great story. It's just like a story that's a little drama that's happening on the internet.
Something to watch, like an entertaining thing. Yeah,
it's entertainment.
Well, maybe it's also possible that some of what they're doing is they're going, I say stuff just to say stuff. So that's obviously what they're doing. She's not saying something that's important. She's just like saying how she feels, just like
I'm
I
like,
say.
I just felt like hopping on the internet and saying stuff too.
Yeah,
Like,
but no, you were being serious, and then they
yeah.
would disregard it.
Being serious. I'm only here saying stuff because I am trying to correct and something that's not true. Like, otherwise I wouldn't get involved. Be like, no reason just to say things.
Yeah. And then they'd also be like, "Oh, you're talking to speaking manners here, and you're talking to Q-darling over here. It means you're all like together and in on this." No, we have different points of view, but we're all trying
We're all
to.
in the same friend group.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
happen to know each other.
They're all fucking witnesses.
Yeah.
You know, it's like these are the people who have more information than you about the subject you're discussing, and they're being treated like shit. You know,
Yeah.
it's like,
And while they're being treated like shit, people are saying believe women, and you're just sitting there like, what are you doing?
Not those women though.
Yeah, no, those don't count. But yeah, there's a lot of people that claimed you're like only existing because of a trust fund. That's one of those ones that, like you said, it's like a direct thing where they're like, he paints for a living. He has to have like been given that, you know.
yeah, I mean, if they don't game it out. Like, okay, my paintings cost a lot of money when I sell one, right? Haven't sold a lot lately for obvious reasons, but you know, so I went years selling them and then living in this shitty little apartment. Not shitty, I love it, but it's small, you know, and so I have saved some money. And then literally everyone I know knows Mandy's full of shit. So they've been helping with the lawsuits. And I think they're just trying to explain like how, because I think a lot of them would never dream of suing anyone. And it's a lot, and it is a big expense. And so they just think, well, how could you be suing people? And it's like, in the most obvious way, like, had a job, I saved the money from the job. I'm no longer spending it on the fantastic medical bills of Mandy Morbid. And the people around me recognize that I've been dicked over and are helping me. Like, that's not a complex conspiracy theory, but like, anything bad that they can stick, they will try to do it because they're not. Again, it's like, you know, Hitler loved animals. Well, so what? Like, you know what I mean? It's like they can't, like they just, like, once you're Hitler, everything that disproves something that they say is flies.
It's disregarded.
Be waved away. You know,
Yeah.
it's like,
You had mentioned that earlier, and you kind of went away from that point where it's like, you know, he was elected in. You had said that, and like that means that people brought him in. He didn't just wrest power. Like, he was charismatic enough to get there, and that's what they're claiming is you too. They disregard the fact that there's other factors and just say,
yeah, just once someone is bad enough, you kind of don't mind your P's and Q's. You know, ethics and being consistent or logical or thoughtful doesn't matter anymore because you've categorized people that way. And that is essentially what everybody in the RPG scene has done with everyone they disagree with in any way, is they've just been like, you know what, people who disagree with me are such assholes that I don't have to discuss anything with them, which is why nothing interesting gets talked about anymore, really.
it's like fourth dimension edition warring, where it like transcends like a game and transcends it like to everything. Like, it's like an ideological war or something at this point.
Yeah, it's just like it to the point where they feel morally tainted if they have a conversation with someone that disagrees with them, if they even take it seriously enough to talk to them. Like, literally anyone watching, like, no matter what shitty stuff they've said about me, they will not do this. But if they wanted to come here and have a conversation with me and point out all the things that they think are wrong with my story, like, I would have that conversation because I think I have an obligation to. I've made accusations about them. I am obligated to back them up. They don't feel the same way.
Yeah. Like, you're not just saying something and then when somebody comes and asks, you're like, well, I got to go find it real quick. Or, well, it maybe didn't happen like that. It's more like somebody asks you, did this happen? And you go, oh, yeah, look at this. Send the link.
Literally ask anything. Like, any of these like, if you have two sides in an argument and one of them is willing to answer every question and the other one goes, well, I don't want to talk about that with you, which one's lying?
Seems like it'd be an obvious answer, but
yeah. But yeah, engagement is itself suspicious at this point, which is a fucked up place to be.
So you talking about like people watching this being like, you know, bring something up to you and you know, air what they think is a bad thing. I've seen some people not necessarily say that you did something bad, but that like you've just given up. Like, the only way forward is to like publish stuff and like show them that you can succeed despite this. A lot of people have that, but it's hard to, pin down names. I think Mike the Bitter has said stuff like that, where he's like, you just need to put out the work and people will buy it. Somebody else on
I just
Facebook.
don't understand like how dumb as dirt you have to be to think the problem here is I can't sell RPG books to people.
Yeah.
Like, like when someone's like a pedophile, they have to knock on everyone's door in their neighborhood and tell them that they're a sex offender. Like that guy's problem, his main problem in life is not like he can't have like money. Like his main problem is his whole life is fucked on every level, like, and even if it were money, the least lucrative thing I or almost everyone on the planet could do is sell RPG books. Like we made good money at LOTFP, but it was never nearly as much as I made making art. Like, but that's not like that. Like my career has been destroyed on every level, but money alone would not fix the problem here. The problem is that like I essentially have had to knock on the door of everyone who has Google and say, I'm an accused predator. Like that, like money's not the problem. And it kind of speaks
that they think that that's all you're doing. Like that, they think that that's the reason.
People's powers of imagination. Number one, most people don't have very good imagination for other people's moral problems, quandaries, whatever. Like they're not good at thinking about what other people's point of view is. But number two, I think the subject is icky. And so they resist gaming it out or thinking it about, like I've seen, I get to see all the texts that people like in Discovery that Viv and Mandy have sent back and forth. And you're like, what does he want? It's like, of course, you know what I want. I want to clear my name, like, but it's like, they're not even thinking that far, like.
You've talked before about like, I hit it with my axe. You had to pay the people commiserate sometimes. And like that ate up a lot of the budget.
Yeah, I mean the Escapist paid for the show, but a lot of the budget of that show was spent being like, I have to pay the girls enough that they're not making porn that day, or that Michelle's.
But that's not why you're like unhappy. You're not like, oh, my revenue streams have dried up. You're more like everything is screwed up.
Let me clear, that's unpleasant.
Yes, but that's not like your like number one concern. Your number one concern is people Google your name.
Is that like I was being interacted with as if I am a fucking felon, like on every level, and like and so the only people who can really fix that are fans on the internet, because fans on the internet, anti-fans on the internet did this. A bunch of anonymous people created a volume of misinformation on the internet that is now like, it's instead of a personality, I have those things. Instead of work, I have those things, and then the only thing to do is people start doing the right thing and going, this isn't sourced, this isn't true, like this, there's no proof of this, like the person, and then holding the people who did the first thing accountable for breaking the law in the way they did, and trying to destroy a human being's life. Like until the good people can act with the effort that the bad people did, this doesn't change even with a court result. Because if no one cares, my life is still fucked. Like, and the good people are like, well, everybody, in all kind of problems, everybody's hoping someone else will fix it. I can only do what I can do, which is like, I can sue people and I can issue statements that only people who already like me will read. Those are the two things Zach can do. I cannot fix the there's a huge volume of just bullshit on the internet until people develop the habit of asking for proof and seeing that as the good and correct way to interact, rather than like obsessed, like mean in some way. Then we're all fucked forever.
You talked earlier about like a failure to have an imagination and like not understand it. That's what there was Skirples did a blog post, and in some of the comments people were like, he only has a couple porn credits, or like that's not an important part of his career. And I was kind of sitting there like, all of the friends that played D&D with him, or almost all of them, came from that part of his career. Like, and then that translated into a blog, which translated into books. It's like they tried to discount like whatever by saying, oh, it's not important.
I mean, it's like, again, the monster in the room is lying about sexual assault.
Yeah.
You know, like, all of this is the things that people say in the horror movie because they don't want to talk about the monster.
Yeah.
You know,
It's
like,
not
I have
personal
a
drama.
blog called Playing D&D with Porn Stars because I literally play D&D with porn stars. Michelle, did we play D&D with porn stars?
Yeah, there was porn stars, and we played a lot of D&D.
You know, like, that was, and that's why a lot of people started reading it, and it was funny, and that was the point.
And people started reading the blog, and they're like, "Hey, there's not a lot of porn stuff happening in this thing." They're like, yeah, because it's not porn.
That's not what it is. Yeah.
It's playing D&D.
Yeah. People in porn are not defined. People are not always defined by their job in that crazy of a fashion. Like, people assumed.
I mean, I also think it was a different time because now, like, it's kind of normal to see people who are in porn, like, have Twitch followings or whatever.
Like, they do other stuff. They're not
Yeah.
just fucking all the time.
Yeah, but at the time, it was like, that was a hurdle to overcome. But it was also funny and novel in a way that it maybe less funny and novel now, but still kind of. You know, I mean, the culture clash is still interesting. But yeah, I mean, I did it for that reason. Everybody accepted that that was perfectly normal reason. Like, yeah, it was funny, like, and everybody who went to Gen Con and hung out with Charlotte Stokely and Ella Darling and would be like, haha, I hung out with the porn stars, and we played D&D. Like, they got it. And now suddenly, it's more socially convenient for them to act outraged.
Yeah.
They, like, it's a different thing. I never made any bones about, like, the fucking, like, how much porn I made. It was never my main job, but like, I was never mainly a game designer either. Like, I'm a painter.
And the effect of people normalizing it is also people don't think about or go and look at, like, the backlash that all you had to deal with. We talked way in the beginning about, like, you guys getting threats and, like, a bit harassed and just sexist. There's still tons of sexist comments on, like, the escapist. Like, you can look at the comments for that very first episode of I Hit It With My Axe, and they're still up and they're still very, very sexist. And
I mean, I feel like all you have
crazy.
to do is just watch every time Michelle gets on Reddit.
Yeah.
Like, how she's fucking treated. Like,
yeah.
Michelle knows more about all of this than all of those people put together.
Well, it's really easy for them to say, something they haven't experienced. Because that's a hard thing to deal with, and I'm sure there's a lot of people you haven't had a lot of people, like, approach you. That's actually an interesting question. Is Zach, you said quite a bit that, like, nobody came and talked to your witnesses. Like, you made avenues or tried to make sure that people could contact them.
I got a couple of emails.
So you got a couple, right?
But just, like, asking, like, hey, like, are you really real? Like, tell me a little bit about yourself and what you know about the situation. I'm like, well, what I know about the situation is out there, but I can just verify that I'm out there. I'm telling the truth. Like, I'm me. I'm a person, and no, Zach isn't lying.
But it's obviously, it was never anywhere near the amount of people who were making accusations. So all these people were claiming stuff, but they were not talking to you. They were not talking to Frankie. They were not talking to anyone.
People that had negative things to say weren't contacting me. It was just people who were like, okay, or like, oh, I saw what you said on Reddit, and, like, I do, like, kind of agree with you, but I just didn't want to say it on there. I wanted to do it in a personal email, I guess.
Yeah. Well, they were scared of, backlash.
Yeah, they didn't want to get argued with like everyone else did. Like, I don't really want to get argued with either, but you gotta say something.
Yeah, which I imagine is hard.
There's a line from Yeats where it's like, the best have lost all conviction and the worst are filled with passionate intensity. It's like Michelle doesn't sit on the RPG internet all day paying attention to the crazy shit that they say, and never has wanted to. And Mandy, for the most part, didn't want to do that either. I was a game master, and so I spent more time doing that. They don't want to deal with these people being assholes, but if they were asked, they would say, these people are fucking assholes. And they are full of passionate intensity because they don't like being held to account for what they did and said. They've never liked it. And then Mandy like lit a match there, and
they're motivated.
And all the good people right now are sitting watching this going, I do not want to get involved. Because a reasonable person doesn't want to argue online for fairness. Like, I argued for fairness for people I didn't like, and it was a terrible idea. You know, like, there were people online that, like, I thought were kind of shitty and they made bad work, but the accusations against them and the bullshitness of them had reached a point where I was like, you can't make an argument about elf games into a lie about
felony stuff. Yeah.
felony.
Like,
Like, please don't do that to all of us, you know, to raise the stakes like that. And, you know, I accused of being his friend, which I wasn't, and whatever. And, like,
yeah.
you know, that I was on their tank. It's like, you don't have to be on someone's side to just argue for the concept of fairness.
Yeah.
And no one really appreciates that until unfairness kind of comes for them.
Well, then they try to stick you with them later on. Like Grim Jim is the big example, but also, you know, Pundit, they always go, well, Pundit and Zach were both consultants on 5e. That must mean that they're like somehow connected, or they're both from the OSR.
Yeah, literally anything they can think of that is bad, they will put me together with it. Like, it could be fucking Elon Musk, it could be fucking COVID, like, whatever it is, they can draw the analogy if they want to. Anything to ignore the monster in the house, which is lying. Like, anything, so they don't have to discuss all the little untruths that they've put out there that discredit them personally, or the fact that they bought into something they didn't do even the minimum work to check. Frankie and Michelle and other people made themselves available to answer questions to anyone online. They said, like, here, contact us, here's our info. If you didn't do that, you're allowed to have an opinion, but you're not allowed to say it, because that's defamation at that point. If you didn't do the things that you went beyond reckless disregard for the truth, like, you didn't do the things you could have done to check, and then you say a crime occurred.
That's not sufficient searching for the truth.
Yeah, in most courtrooms, no. I mean, different ones have different standards, and different jurisdictions are different. But also, like, morally, why would you do that? Like, if you don't know what fucking happened, why are you talking? Why is that passionate intensity there? Why is the desire to talk so much greater than the desire to make sure what you say is true? Of course, you have a biased sample, because we only see the people who talk, not the people who lurk. Most people are lurking. But honest to God, most people watching this right now have never said a goddamn thing about it, or maybe said one thing once. Most people reading all these blogs and participating in these controversies and buying or not buying things are lurkers.
Or they see something and they decide to lurk. They see somebody speak up and get freaked out about it because it's...
But most of their behavior is lurking.
Yeah.
And they are just sitting there hoping, if they like the work, they hope that this will blow over. And if they don't like the work, they don't care. But what we're seeing is the people who decided to talk. And what has happened for everyone, and this affects everyone, lurkers, not workers, people making stuff, people not making stuff, people who are just trying to get material that they like, anyone who is at all interested in anything I was doing, everyone is at the mercy of the people who decided to talk.
Because they're the ones who get heard, they're the one who gets considered.
So unless
if you don't make your opinion known, nobody can consider it.
Yeah, unless you counterweigh it, this is the life that, and this is going to happen to everyone and everything that you value, you know, is that the craziest people who are more dedicated to talking will take over, unless you go, hey, it is cool to have like a standard of proof, or it is okay to ask for evidence, or like it is okay to like maybe ask like women of color if they disagree with the white women. Like, these are all things that are like, those are reflexes that need to be built up. They need to be.
That's why when I jumped into this, that was one of the first things I tried to figure out was like, why is that not the normal thing? Or just kind of trying to consider, like, if I'm going to be in this space, what problems are there in this space that I'm going to have to deal with? Because I knew that it wasn't just going to be, I can put out whatever I want and people will pick it up. It's more like there's going to be things to, you know, have to deal with.
And even before I ever thought about putting out any product, that's how I thought of my first few blog entries, because I enjoyed reading those blogs, but then I would see that there was a lot of places where the conversation was really boring and circular and nobody was making anything interesting. And I was like, well, what causes this? And I was like, I just made one rule for my blog. My comment section was, I'm running a web page. I will not host misinformation on the web page. It seemed like a really simple thing at first. Like, if it's not true, why would I let you put it in public where it could be Googled? that got suddenly incredibly complicated as soon as you understand, okay, well, two people might disagree about what's true. Okay, well, if we're going to disagree about what's true, I need to be fair and give you the opportunity to prove that what you say is true, right? Which means there's some more rules, including the rule about asking questions. But it all came out of that. It's not hard to understand. It's the same rule that they follow in academia, they follow it in journalism, they follow it in, or they try to, or they try to follow it in science and everything else. It's like, and in courtroom, it's like whenever you acknowledge that the truth matters, and if you're in a community talking about something all day, you should at least acknowledge the truth about that thing matters. Then there needs to be some pretty simple and specific rules about like investigating when people disagree. And if you're not doing that, you're really just a bunch of people advertising themselves. You're not talking at all.
People are always trying to shirk their duties and avoid that, which actually kind of leads into this kind of question I had. Something that Scrap and Patrick Stuart, especially Patrick Stuart, said was, you seemingly have this total inability to admit any wrongdoing or being wrong. I think Michelle can maybe speak of this because it's like, that's a different, when you're writing a blog post, you're writing a comment, you're being cognizant of what you're saying. But like maybe in day-to-day life, you have to admit you're wrong on like little things. Does he never admit that he's wrong? Or
Of course he has.
okay, so he's not like a perfect human like they make him out to be, that he somehow
like, like Zach on the internet tries to be concise, he's well spoken, he has things that he wants to say, like, just at home it's not like he's like going on about things all the time. He's a regular guy.
He's not like lecturing and like
yeah, he's not like sitting us down and lecturing us about like things and
because that's actually something that Mandy kind of said was he would make lectures that went in circles of manipulation, or he'd fly into fits of rage where he'd scream or throw things. Yeah, that's
really no.
But even if you look at her posts, like it does, like, because again, the description you're giving secondhand actually goes a little bit further than what she was comfortable saying, because Mandy knows like nobody ever threw anything at her, like she was very careful about that. She tried to create the impression of bigger accusations than
because it says slam doors and throw things at the walls, not at her. You weren't.
Yeah, I think I threw a stuffed toy at a wall once because I was frustrated about some, like some dumb thing that, tax guy, or, like fucking AT&T bill, like you could say I threw something at the wall.
Like people slam doors, people get mad.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, Mandy punched me in the fucking eye, admitted it. It wasn't an argument. Like,
she kicked a hole in the door.
She kicked a hole in the like the number, but then it's like everything is excusable if it's Mandy, because there's nothing that could ever happen to her that could make her responsible for her actions in people's minds.
So that punch, you had witnesses for that specific event.
There was a limousine full of people where I was literally taking her to.
So what was the miscommunication? Was that like a particularly rocky patch?
You can speak to that.
I wasn't there in the limo. Temper was there and KK were there.
Yeah, and Sawa was there, but basically, like, we were in a limo. It was a white limo, and basically, like, long story short, Michelle, Jennifer, and Mandy wanted to go to Disneyland, and so I was like, kind of like stunting, and I was like, "We're gonna go," because Jennifer didn't come to LA very often, so it was a big deal. And I've never rented a limo before or since, but I rented this limo, and we went to Disneyland in a limo. We had a great time, basically. But on the way, it was a white limo, and I was like, I wanted a black one. And for some reason, in Mandy's drunk, twisted mind, she thought that I said that I wanted a black girlfriend. Without a word, she just punched me right in the fucking eye. Everyone in the limo was like, "Whoa, girl, what the fuck?" And I was like, "What was that?" And then she's like, "I thought blah blah blah," and I was like, "Yeah, no." And then afterward, like, it's like afterwards, Kimberly came to me and was like, she's got something boiling in her. You know what I mean? Like, that's a weird, like, also, like, a lot of women who have been abused have said to me, like, if you're afraid of a man, that's not how you deal with them, even when you're drunk. Like, if you're physically afraid of someone, like, you don't just haul off.
Because then you think you're going to get it back worse later.
Yeah, like, like, that's...
And you don't know when, necessarily.
Yeah, and Mandy has never claimed that I laid a fucking finger on her. But, Kimberly said, she's not well. Like, there's something, like, I'd be worried. And I was like,
So was that maybe like a reaction to like she initiated things and she thought you were somehow initiating something, or because
no,
I've heard
it was just Mandy's weird jealousy and insecurity issues, which again, borderline personality disorder, this, or at least, that fits, like Mandy's being treated very well. She's the center of attention in this limousine, but she's got Mandy shit in her
Mhm.
head,
you had
and
related a story of like being at a comedy club with, maybe it was Vivka, I forget which person, but she was like, I want to have sex with you. And you're like, no, like I it's early days and I don't have the
yeah,
okay from Mandy. Like that was a big part of it, is that
yeah, like Viv wanted to have sex. We had all started living together, and a few weeks in, Viv was like, it was just me and Viv went out, and Mandy was homesick, and Viv was like, wanted to have sex in the bathroom, and I was like, I haven't okayed this with Mandy, and she's probably asleep, and like we're not at that point in the relationship yet. I don't like. Mandy was very policing about who I would have sex with, which is fine.
so it didn't, but it didn't go
Polyamorous.
both ways. Like you weren't policing what she did. She
I
very
mean,
much was.
it was largely one way, but also like I could go out a lot more than Mandy could. So but I didn't get in her way because I understood that that was fair. Like, but she
And
was a person who had
you
to
weren't
do.
not you weren't
Yeah,
annoyed, or like that wasn't something you weren't okay with.
I mean, again, I don't want to put you on the spot, but Michelle could probably speak to this more than me. Is like Mandy was more moody about these things.
Yeah, she just had more rules and restrictions about. I mean, she didn't have sex with other men, but she had sex with other women, and she was kind of allowed to just do that at her own discretion. But Zach was more like, she went to Montreal once. She made like a list of like women that Zach was allowed to have sex with, who was allowed to hang out with, who wasn't allowed to have sex with, like.
Yeah,
So
but
very
Mandy did have
controlling.
sex with a few men during the relationship, but it was like she just wasn't in contact with a lot of them. There's a RPG guy that she was like that I was friends with, that she was having sex with toward the end, and I was cool with that. We were friends. And there was a couple. Yeah, it was a few, but it was like
But it
much
was
less.
much rarer.
But I mean, but I was out and able to interact with the world way more than Mandy was. So I didn't begrudge her that. But she had a lot of. I mean, every polyamorous relationship has complicated jealousy things because normal heterosexual, like typical traditional heterosexual couples with one male and one female partner have had hundreds of thousands of years to figure out how to work that. Polyamory is a new thing and people are not always great at it. So but the reaction to just punch me out of nowhere rather than talk was kind of, Mandy reacted impulsively and would jump to conclusions very easily. Like, and if nobody's around her to kind of bring her back to earth, she could run away with things in a
With
way
an
that,
idea, just go with an idea that maybe is not good.
yeah, I mean that is the clear, like there's a reason that all the people who knew her well are not close to her anymore. It's like she's surrounded by people whose only window into those years is through Mandy's mouth.
So something that she said that kind of makes everything else like have a context with her. She said you were very violent and angry in the relationship, like early on, and this led to programming. Uh, that's come up a couple times, like in tweets as well.
It's basically she has what's called a recovered memory theory, and recovered memory theory is what drove the satanic panic, like this belief that there were satanic cults that were abusing people in the 80s. And basically it's that you can, and the reason she's trying to explain the fact that like at exactly 0 times during our relationship did she ever say any of this, or to anyone, me included. After the fact, after we broke up, she like she read about or heard about recovered memory theory, where you have a memory in retrospect that you didn't know you had. So she claims to have a recovered memory of me like telling her like she wasn't allowed to not have sex with me, and her believing that and deciding to marry me afterwards. I don't know what any of that is about. Like but it would have been like the first week that we were even really seeing each other, and
So that
it's like,
basically is applying like to you that you have like magical like voodoo powers.
Yeah, if I
Yeah.
had magical powers, I would have used them in so many more productive ways and so much more often.
And probably a lot more ethical than something like that.
Or just, in the
Maybe,
last few years,
yeah.
I would have used them on everyone. But basically, her claim is that I said a magic word early on in our relationship that made her go, not only agree to act for the next 10 years like literally the most sexually aggressive woman you will ever meet, with a large number of women and some men, to say that she liked it, to blog extensively about it, and talk about almost nothing else on the internet and in her personal life than like how excited she was to fuck almost everyone, and to become a porn actress, and to marry the guy who said it. Like, all of this is part of the programming, and yet also that like this is something she didn't want to do, somehow communicated clearly that she didn't want to do it to me, and I did it anyway. She didn't remember it, and somehow I'm supposed to remember it, and it's
It's
just
just very strange. Yeah.
it transcends belief, because
Maybe you haven't recovered that memory yet.
Yeah. It's all it goes back to conspiracy. It's like all like this like planned out thing somehow, and not like a natural relationship
yeah, like a
happening.
guy says one thing to you, you then fly back. She's back in Ottawa, living with her parents again. Like, we hang out, I say whatever thing, she goes back there, and then she's like, I'm gonna go back to New York, because we were living in New York at the time, and I'm gonna marry this guy. Like, and I'm gonna live like, she had so many other options besides doing whatever I said, or in this like fantasy.
Well, what she always told me was that she went back to marry you because she wanted to do porn, and if she could marry you, then she could work in the States and do porn.
Yeah, and also we could be together, which
yeah,
that's why we did it. But it's
she
like,
liked you right away too.
yeah, it's like,
Well, that was one of the first things she asked you, right? You've talked about one of the first things she was like, "How do I get into porn?" Or,
yeah, it was before we even met.
Yeah.
Right? Like, she's now representing herself as someone who was like pushed into this by me. Like, and I didn't even bring it up. And before we even meet, she's like, ooh, we should hang out and like tell me about how to get into porn. It's like she is trying, had an audience who would believe anything she said for years. And so she created this personality. Then, through years after creating it, so from 2016 to 2019, she had these lies that she told about her life. And then when it came around in 2019 to release her claims about me into the world, which she then did, she didn't realize how far they had drifted from verifiable reality. Like, she has all these emails and texts with me just talking about how excited she is about the life that she is leading. And they have conned her by believing her into, it's like a,
it's
like
like
you
a
say,
feedback loop or something.
exactly. And so the rest of us are like, this Mandy is pretending to be a person that she never was.
Like after 2018, like like Mandy still told me she loved me. She told me I was one of her favorite people. Like, talking to me made her happy, and then skip forward a year, and now I'm a PTSD trigger, and I'm just Zach's girlfriend that he moved in.
Yeah, and also like the last time you hung out with her, I was not there, and you were making out.
Yeah.
Right? Like, she went from literally hanging out with Michelle, like long after we're divorced or separated, right? Yeah. She's hanging out with Michelle, making out with Michelle, telling her how much she likes her. The next time they interact, it's this shit.
Yeah, it's distant. It's completely different.
Yeah.
So during the relationship, Michelle.
Remember, every single person online who's backed up Mandy is telling you that Michelle is a liar and has made all this shit up.
So Michelle, during like your being in that relationship with both of them, like Mandy, based on what you said, like Mandy was not being like a subservient person. She was not like she was not a meek person.
She, if we were all having sex, she was the one to instigate it. Like, it was,
that's what she was pushing for.
Yeah, and even like just the beginning of me being romantically involved with them, it was kind of her bringing me into it.
So it's just so baffling that all these things could flip. It's not just like one part of the story flipped. It's like over time, every single switch got turned until everything was reversed. Everything that was good is the opposite, which is, it just doesn't seem like it could all come over. Like, all that couldn't happen at once. Because you said before that like some stuff happened over time, right?
Borderline personality disorder or some other like like mental illness is a real fucking thing, you know,
Hmm.
like there's this thing where everybody like jokes about how crazy they are and they, oh, I do this all the time and like I always say these crazy things and I'm a crazy girl and I do these terrible things to my boyfriend, but then also like believe everything I say, like don't ever treat me like I'm not a reliable source, you know, like all of these things sound are bizarre, but they also sound super familiar to every single person, male or female, that I've talked to who has been in a relationship with someone who's borderline. They go, I don't even say what happened. I just go, yeah, well, my ex was borderline. And they go, oh fuck. Now maybe she's not. Maybe she has some other mental illness that is of a equivalent, you know, something else going on. But
Hmm.
like, maybe, you know, like other than the one she thought she had for 10 years. But like the point is like mental illness does this to people where like they can become unreliable about their own
Yeah. Or just a
past.
different person. It's not like a disease. I mean, even diseases like a flu. Some person will catch a flu and they'll be slightly ill, and other people will catch flu and be very ill. Mental illness is the same thing. It's not like you have like there's a range of like very like affected by the mental illness or not much, and people can't
And
really consider that.
there's a range of support systems, and what Mandy did is she cut herself off from her support system. You know, she cut herself off to people who could ground her and be like, you said this on Tuesday and you said this whole opposite thing on Wednesday. You know, like she cut her, and she's been cut off so long that she no longer has a grounding. You know, she is no longer connected to people who can fact check her,
Mhm.
you
She's
know.
just kind of floating off in space. Like
Yeah.
it's not yeah. When you're not connected to any of the people that like were there, if you start making different claims, yeah, like you said, there's nobody
Yeah,
to
when she moved back to Canada, she just kind of cut everyone off. She just stopped talking to all of her friends. She was like, "No, you guys hang out with Zach.
yeah.
I don't want to
And
talk
it
to him."
wasn't just you; it was like all the people that you knew alongside her as
I
well,
was the
all
only
those
person
friends.
that she knew was friends with Zach still, that she still talked to for up until up
Yeah,
until February 2019. But
yep.
everyone else, she was like, "Nope, I don't want to hear anything from any of you." Uh,
So maybe some of it was maybe some of those changes were gradual because you talked about her at one point like calling a male friend of yours from like a kitchen or like doing various things like behind your back or but then like what you're saying is at a certain point it's just like everybody gets cut out at
Well, I
that
think
point.
the last year ish, last 2 years of our relationship, she was getting sicker and just things were going downhill. You know, like that was absolutely true. But my internal thing was like, oh, Mandy's ill. You know, she's lashing out at people because she's sick.
yeah.
You know, um, and so I kind of explained her behavior that way. She didn't make accusations against me that were very concrete. And when she did, they were just sort of relationshipy arguments. They weren't this stuff about abuse, you know, it
Yeah.
was just, and I've talked to her after the accusations. She actually had a Zoom call with me this summer. And all she talked about was like, you know, she did not talk about any serious allegations. She just was like, you know, you said, you know, you lied and said that I was a liar. And I'm like, yeah, like this and this and this. And she's like, well, you know, you cheated on me with so and so. And I'm like, this is what she wanted to talk about. You understand? Like she goes through
Yeah.
all the emotional hoops to go have a Zoom call with me before we go to court, all this shit. And instead of talking about the very serious allegations she's made and enabled, she wants to kind of have a 3 hour relationship
Yeah.
argument.
Like small talk almost like
Yeah, it was so
compared in
it was
comparison.
like, are you sure? It was like the kind of argument you have with someone you're dating for 10 years. It's just like, oh my God, what about this? And what about that? And it was like, we're not talking about any. I'm like, Mandy, we're going to trial here. Like, it felt very, very,
Like some weird dream or something.
it felt
Just like
pity is
mm,
like, usually when there's someone you love and they are distressed or confused, you don't see that look on their face for very long because the first thing you do as an instinct is you move in and you go, okay, no, it's going to be okay. We're going to handle this. But there was no one to come in and say that to her. So she'd be caught in these weird backwards ass stories she's told. And you could just see her looking like the synapse is not firing properly. Like I used to do this thing where, okay, so we're lying in bed, we're gonna go to sleep, and I turn my head and my nose goes, I think I've said this before, like goes up against her shoulder and it's like a pig nose. And I would go, wee wee, I'm a pig. And she goes, Zach, there's a pig in the bed. And I go, I don't know what you're talking about. There's no pig in the bed. And I go, wee wee, I'm a pig. And she go, I heard it. I heard the pig in the bed. And it was like a bit that we would do, and then we go to sleep. Then years later, in the papers that she's filed under oath to the Canadian court, she says Zach would make animal noises at night and then gaslight me by saying he didn't do it in order to keep me awake and not let me sleep.
And he called me crazy.
Like, all of how crazy that is aside, like, why would a husband of a chronically disabled person whose main interest, everyone agrees, is having sex with that disabled person, want to keep her awake any longer than possible, than necessary, like, and make her more tired in the morning? Like, you don't want to live in a one-room studio apartment with a tired disabled person, like, it's just like, I don't know how to express how unmoored from reality she's become.
It seems to me like what people are trying to use all these individual little things is like they're trying to say these are all like the tools that Zach used to like get under people's skin or like get them to believe him, or like all these little constant jokes. Those weren't just jokes, those were like a subtle attempt to try to like scare them or intimidate them. But they weren't in the relationship. It wasn't a thing that only you had. You'd both.
I was going, wee wee, I'm a pig. A
exactly.
Attempt to do anything. Like,
but you know what I mean.
Villain is that?
I don't know.
Like,
but that's just what I've seen.
Put that guy together, draw the costume, list his power set. Like, none of this makes any sense, But it's like the people who say it never get held accountable until I sue them. Like, nobody else is going, hey, this doesn't make sense, so I have to do it myself. It's like, what else can I do? It's like, there was a guy who called me, and he wanted to write an article for Vice about abusers who sued their, accusers. And I said, like, I got him on the phone and I was like, number one, don't email someone and say that to them. Like, you're an abuser. Like, but also, like, he's like, well, what I'm interested in, why are you suing? It's like, briefly detach yourself from like the only point of view you've realized is possible here, which is that you think I obviously did it. And like, what would literally even someone who did it do? They would try to clear their name. Like, that's not an interesting journalistic question to be going around asking. Like, of course you're gonna sue. There's no other avenue. Like, I've literally been denied every other venue to talk to the public or clear my name. Like, I don't have a choice but to sue. Like, I don't have a, yeah.
Like, a person with a screen in Omega Dungeon said, you make your personal drama unavoidable. Like, anytime anybody's like, hey, just make a book, you're like, no, these things, it's not personal drama at this point. It's like become like a public serious thing. It's not just like an argument.
The second someone accuses someone else of a felony, you can't say it's drama. Like, but the second someone accuses anyone of anything, it should be taken seriously. And if it's not supported, that person should have a real good reason why they have absolutely no proof. Or should be dismissed as a voice until they can apologize for having done that and wasted everyone's time and taken up everyone's space and taken the oxygen out of the room.
Like, all the time.
This is, there was public accusations made, and then in pretty much every space where Zach would have been able to reply to these himself, he was like blocked, banned, taken out of these spaces. So he can't even publicly speak where people are talking about this. That's another reason why you have to sue, because that's the only place where you get to put your side
have your say. Yeah, it's like if they jailed you and then they said like, oh, he's locked in the jail cell, so he can't come out to do like his deposition because he's in the jail cell. That's like a thing that happens. They'll throw you in something and then not let you actually I forget what that's called, but it happens where they don't even let you testify or don't even let you have your say. They just
Yeah.
kick you out.
Like, we're going to talk about this and we'll tell you what happens.
Yeah. And
There's a
then they
French,
just try to control the narrative.
there's a French saying which is like, "He who is absent is always wrong."
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
and they've created a situation where finally they can be right because I'm absent. You know.
We were talking about drama, and earlier you mentioned, Michelle, that like when you were on Reddit, you were on these places, people would just be like, "Oh, this is just drama," and like kind of discount it as like entertainment or something.
Yeah.
I've seen that too. It's really, really wild whenever I try to say like, "Hey, you should like care about this," and not just like say crazy stuff, and they're like, "Well, I don't really want to like involve myself in drama." And I'm like, "It's not. That's not how that works." But I guess that's kind of a shared experience with anybody who's trying to like make some way forward, trying to help Zach. It's like people are just like either they want to paint him as like this horrible abuser, or they just like I don't want to get involved because I don't care about drama. Which
I mean, you're allowed to say you don't want to get involved, but then the thing
yeah,
to do is not go, "He's an asshole, I'm not getting involved." It's to say nothing.
yeah,
You know, as soon as you say anything, including "he's an asshole," you should be like, you're obligated to be like, "Okay, well, why do you think that? Like, as soon as you chip in your people, that's not the internet. The internet is you snipe from cover and run away. Like, people
And
want
if
to
you
say
say
shit.
something and you don't want to get involved, you still have to like understand that people are going to reply to you. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Like, the inability of people to just be like, they know that they don't know what they're talking about, and then just like, well, just don't say anything. You know, like, there are so many accusations online that I've said nothing about other people because literally, like, I don't know.
yeah. And you didn't necessarily have the time, energy, or contacts to like contact that person. You don't
Yeah,
see an accusation and go, I need to talk to every single person that has any accusation made against them.
yeah, I mean, I have a clear sense of what a person who is accused or accusing, their rights and obligations. You know, like, when I accuse, I need to back up my accusation. When I am accused, I need to, like, answer questions, and I
Yeah,
feel, like, but the internet's full of people claiming other people did bad things. Probably everyone who's been on the internet has been accused of doing bad things. To speak on it at all, to say it, type a single line, means you are now under the obligation to justify whatever you fucking said. Like, if you say, "I don't know what happened," you're off the hook. If you say, "Well, I think that it's true," then you now are joining a, a, a mountain of people who are saying that, and you have to justify your presence there. And if you say it is true, you've just committed a crime or broken the law if it isn't, and you didn't do your due diligence. Like,
yeah,
you don't have actually, there's no free speech right in any country that any of these people live in that says somebody, you can say someone's an abuser without doing anything to fucking check. Like, that's not a right you have under free speech. Like, that's the way that, that's why we have, drug laws that say that you can't claim a drug does something it doesn't. You can't claim that milk, will, like, not only gives you strong bones and teeth, but lets you fly. Like, you're not actually allowed to lie on the internet about fucking everything. And people generally don't talk about high stakes things most of the time. And so they don't realize that those guardrails are there and they're widely acknowledged as, like, kind of important,
yeah.
you know?
They just kind of skate over them like they don't matter usually because they don't feel the personal responsibility that they should for whatever reason.
It's like they have the things that they're saying through a bullhorn, and then they're also in a rowboat going down a river. And when you start, like, kind of saying, "Hey, the things you're saying through that bullhorn are, like, not true," they're just like, I just want to go further down the river so I don't have to be in this zone where I'm being paid attention to by people I don't want to talk to. It's like you're involving their personal struggle to sort of talk and be interesting and make friends on the internet without either being saying such stuff that's like such weak sauce and so boring that no one listens to them, while also not saying something so high stakes and contrarian that they're actually
Yeah.
held responsible for.
They're like con men in the Wild West. They're like, oh, okay, I got found out in this town. Let's go to another town and just continue until I find a town that'll accept my con.
I mean, that's
Basically,
Olivia Hill's job, basically. Cavegirl, like, that's their whole MO, like, burn the people in one community and then move to the next and then burn them again. And, sooner or later there's whole bunches of people who believe the con man and are using, like, soap that turns your
And then they accuse you, like there's several of those people will accuse you specifically, like Scarples is one example where they were like, seems like Zach operates best in like this air of mystery where nobody knows the facts. And I'm like, yeah, that's you guys doing that. That's you people doing that, not
Yeah, I
him.
mean, literally, if you look at any place where I'm allowed to comment, but very much including, Skirple's page, which you're referring to, he has a long post about all the things I allegedly did. And when I ask Skirples a question, Skirples does not answer. And when someone asks me a question, I do answer. Like
Yeah.
I
And when
can,
you don't, then they like latch onto it because they ask for something you can't necessarily give, or you're not willing to answer their questions because they refuse to answer yours every time.
right.
Right?
I mean, it's like as long as the rules should be fair, right? Like I know who you are, you know who I am. You're asking me a question, I'm asking you a question. Like I
It's
will
got to be
play
that
by.
exchange of information.
Yeah, but
Otherwise, nothing
even
gets done.
yeah, like it's very odd that nobody even acknowledges that answering questions is important. Like you have to be able to justify and back up the things you say. You have to have an explanation. Things that make sense have explanations. Things that are true have explanations. Things that are bullshit show that very quickly when you try to pull them apart.
Okay, well here's a fun quote from somebody on Something Awful named Froghammer. They said he also shockingly is super into playing games that involve pretend worlds that he's in charge of, where the rules are frighteningly rigid and inflexible, and he harbors an intense hatred for people who prefer games with looser rules. His games are also super violent and sexually charged. There's a lot to unpack here. What do you have to say about that, Michelle? You've played in his games.
Sounds like D&D to me. There's got to be someone in control of the game. There's fighting, there's weapons, so that's violence. I don't know, sexually
It's just,
charged. That's just a group dynamic.
but they're just framing it as if like he's
And,
somehow like a control
and
freak.
Zach isn't really that rigid, actually, with the rules. I'd say he's,
Yeah, I mean, you make all your own like hacks and your own game, like your own worlds and your own new
yeah,
creatures. So it's like,
yeah, someone basically like describing a game and then being like, and Zach likes to run the game. Like, that's toxic. Like, are all DMs toxic?
Yeah, I
that's
mean, the thing is, like, that is, I think most people can see that as kind of the silly hyperbole that it is. But the weird thing about it is that all of this started back in 2009 with people who genuinely believe shit like that. They did, like, when old school games started being kind of popular on the internet with Jeff Reen's blog, once that started, there is a huge bunch of people who saw deep symbolism or meaning in every little jot and tittle of the rules and aesthetics of those games. And they wanted to snipe at people for playing a different game than them, but did not want to have a conversation where those assumptions were ripped apart or analyzed or in any way really discussed like as grown-ups, because they felt like they had already had those discussions with each other.
hmm.
Um, and that to explain to someone outside the RPG scene that people actually are justifying fake sexual assault allegations because of game design differences sounds nuts. And to everyone inside the scene, they're like, yeah, I kind of have seen that. Like everyone has seen the thing of like, oh, if you use old school D&D, you're using dark elves and dark elves are racist. Like,
Yeah. Well, they're going back to like the mazes and monsters
Or
things. Where, like,
elves.
yeah, if you're the DM, like you need to be wearing a robe and there's like torches and you're gonna like whip your players or something crazy like that. Like it's some
yeah,
sort of
but it's
power
like,
trip.
but the thing is that those people weren't just lunatics in the comments. They were people who designed games and are now like they now have jobs that are influential in the industry and they were important in destroying my life. Whitney Beltran is a great example. She now works at D&D. She's working in the AAA D&D video game. And she began her career online by saying like crazed hyperbolic shit like that about what D&D entails. And it's like that's like saying, oh, well, you like pizza and pizza is round, and you know what else is round is a bowling ball, and bowling balls are there to knock over pins, and you think of everyone as pins. It's just like it's free
Yeah, it's
association,
just like
you
they're
know
just
like,
it's like the jazz
it's
of
not
thought.
But when this began, the arguments were about where I was saying essentially we have to evaluate claims like that. And once we do, we take the people who can't provide evidence for those claims, and we go, you don't get to talk to everyone else until you apologize or get therapy or somehow stop fucking up every conversation with your dumb concern that doesn't make any sense. Like, take it seriously, evaluate it, yada yada yada. They hated that because they just want to talk on the fucking internet. They don't care if what they say is true. And that became this whole hate spiral where everybody was like slowly realizing that they had at least one friend who would just say stupid shit that made no sense and didn't want to be responsible for it. And it's like, well, why are we all talking about this game every day on the goddamn internet then? If you don't care if what you say is true, like, we actually need stuff that helps us play the game, or else we don't need to have this community. Like, you need the truth, or you don't have a good reason to have a community. You know, a community based on things that aren't true is like Stormfront or the Ku Klux Klan. Like, your community isn't reality based. It gets worse and worse, you know?
Yeah. Well, it just continues. It's like its own little separate machine that just goes off on a wild tangent because it has to fuel itself. It leads to like inbred thinking where they have to like justify
Also,
what they're
really,
doing.
a simple social thing is, why doesn't Froghammer talk to Michelle?
Yeah.
Like,
or anybody else.
Like, but like, Michelle's in the game. You'd be like, why are you putting up with this bizarre abusive treatment? You know, like it's like,
Yeah,
somehow I represent other people, you know, like you can't just have a conversation with someone who clearly doesn't agree with you.
Well, and Michelle interestingly was like, I describe all that, or I say all that, and she's like, well, that sounds like, kind of like what it was, but that's what you guys were doing. You guys were playing a game that was sexually charged and violent because that's what you guys wanted to be playing. You
Honestly,
liked to hit stuff with your
there was
axe.
not very much sex in our game. Like,
No, but you know what I mean. They're
there
using
were a bunch of
hyperbole.
porn stars playing the game, but compared to shit I've seen online, like, the only time
like,
anyone
we rolled pretty bad on when we were trying to seduce anyone. Not a lot of good rolls happening. So our team ended up being actually pretty awkwardly sexual.
But also, like, I feel like I didn't bring it up. That was mostly you guys bringing it up, which is also a conversation nobody ever wanted to have. Like, nobody wants to talk to the girls about why they were okay with the way, like, sexual representation in D&D.
Yeah.
They all wanted to blame me for their behavior. It was like nothing Mandy or any of them could possibly do could be their fault. It was all my magical powers.
Well, that's the really interesting part about reading your play reports is like you'll be saying something like they encountered this, and then you'll see all of them react in these varied ways, and it's like, no, they're not. You're not pushing it. They're the ones that are going in like a different direction. The players are the ones who like make all the crazy situations, usually in these RPGs. At least it's what I see.
With our weird choices.
Yeah.
My ideal version of an online space is Froghammer then gets asked to get into a conversation about all of those claims and prove all of them. And if they can't prove all of them, and then Froghammer ceases to be listened to by anyone until they go, okay, I was kind of being like hyperbolic for effect in a way that doesn't really help.
Or where did they get their info? It's like if they didn't watch all of I Hit It With My Axe, like, let's say they watched all of I Hit It With My Axe, and then they just say, these are all the things that I saw, and those are things I'm not okay with. But instead they're saying that, like, you, Zach, are doing something that your players are not okay with, or you're like pushing the limits without it being okay. They're like putting their own ethical things and saying like you have to like hold yourself to my standards.
They have a people like that. The people who have like game design issues with me, which is a very specific subset of the hate train. They were kind of the first on the hate train, but they're also kind of distinct. They don't appear to actually read what I write or the games I write. Like, the issues that they ascribe to me are things that more conservative OSR designers do, and I don't.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a person, like, I ran Dread at Indiecade because I liked the game. Like, that's a very loose game. I've written games that are probably, they would consider loose. Like, they're again, it's just like Mandy with the bad boyfriend tweets. It's like they are thinking of a traditional minded evil game master that they've heard about, and they're conflating a real person with them. Right. And that's always been their problem, is that they can't read real well, and they don't want to, and they're not motivated to, because their intuition that something is off is enough for them, which should never be true if you're going to then talk in public.
It's that constant thing where you would talk to people and you'd be like, hey, just so you know, if I start working or like I start writing, there's going to be people who say stuff. There's going to be people who like are all over everywhere hounding us, and like we've got to talk about that beforehand, because they would show up and just say baseless things, right? Because they would just look at it and not actually read it and just go, let's go nuts. Let's find anything we can to like make this a problem.
Yeah, toxic communities exist because people are resistant to standards, even simple ones that are like kindergarten level easy. Like something gets proven wrong, everyone knows it's wrong, including the person who said it. You apologize. Like somehow, like that, which everybody learns the first day of school, is considered like a wild, extreme way to behave, because it's not typical. And it's like, why did these people get to be in charge?
Hmm. All right, let me take a quick look and just trying to fill out, make sure I didn't miss anything. Because I tried to find kind of the claims that are repeated by a bunch of people, and then some of the people that were kind of commonly saying that thing over and over, or the main person that said it, and then a lot of other people would repeat it. Um, you've talked a little bit about Mike Merles. There's a ton of people who claim that like you just get like a list and then you harass those people, but you've talked a little bit about that before, so I don't.
I mean, I can talk about it. I mean, the point of this video is that people can't read, so they
Yeah.
don't need a video.
Well,
So people
see
don't.
James Hargrove, Akeche, Collin the Doodle, Kai Top, which is a goon, Stocky, and then most of those are just random people. But the big people that claim Mike Merles gave you a list of names. Um, I mean, you'd probably know those names better than I. It was hard to find some things.
Let's
'Cause things
clarify.
get deleted.
Like, this is what happened. Basically, in 2014 or 13 or 14-ish, Mike contacted me. We had no real contact, like one email back and forth, really, for a little bit. And he said, I'm putting together a team of consultants. Do you want to be on it? I said, yeah, sure, pay me. So I got copies of the early rules, didn't playtest them. They claim I was a playtester now, which I wasn't, which is a weird oversight on Watsy's part. But no, I just wrote what I thought about each successive.
Do you still have non-disclosure agreements?
I have some kind, but it's probably more like non-disparagement. I can describe the job I did.
Okay, so you didn't playtest at all then? That's kind of interesting.
No, I didn't playtest at all. I just wrote what I thought about the rules at each draft. And then when it was announced that I was on there, or when it came out, when the actual book came out, they were too stupid to notice that me being announced had happened long before. But when it actually came out, Tracy Hurley, who had been harassing me for years, and Olivia Hill, who had been harassing me for years, and all the goons who had been harassing me for years, publicly in ways that everyone knew, then claimed that I was, somehow, how I'm anti-diversity and trying to keep women out of gaming. Michelle, just wave at the camera. And that it's terrible that I'm that I'm a consultant, right?
Yeah.
I then immediately said these people are all assholes and they're full of shit, and I named them because they were publicly harassing me for years up to that. This was 2014 or 15. The harassment began in 2009, right? The attack on me by Tracy and Olivia Hill's wife was in 2011, which was attack for me and Michelle and everybody else being in Maxim. So that's recorded, right? So they've been harassing us since at least 2011. I then proactively contacted Mike and said, hey, we're seeing all this. If it's causing any problems for Watsy, I can, let me know what I can do. Here's a list of people that I know. I gave him, I told him who was a fucking piece of shit. And, and he was like, yeah, I've asked people to back up what they're saying about you with evidence, and they don't have it. That's it.
Hmm.
Like, which is what always happens. Like, and again, these are people who never met me or not making accusations about anything that happened at a con or in real life. I'd never
Yeah.
even been to a con.
Or in your apartment, or like where you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I had never been in a real life situation with any of these people ever. So everything that they're saying happened online, everything they're complaining about. And yet they could produce exactly zero of it. Google Plus still existed. My blog still existed. They had every single possible chain of evidence. They could not produce anything.
Yeah.
They were, therefore, lying. Like, they could have
Or,
that day just screen capped it. They
yeah.
were liars.
But then they get on you for screen capping things. Like, he's obviously like always trying. They could have done that
Yeah.
themselves to like
I'll tell
make
you
their
this, it
point
doesn't
known.
go over real well in court when you go, that guy has evidence, that means he's lying. The judge
Yeah.
does not like that.
Yeah, that's insane.
So they then develop a new narrative because it becomes obvious during the controversy that accusing me of having anti-diversity views is not sustainable. I was, like, people knew me in the OSR. Stacey Delorfano, all kinds of other people were standing up for me and going like, I'm gay, and Zach and whatever. It was not a sustainable lie. So they invented a new lie to keep the complaints going, which was me pointing out that they had done this bad thing was harassing them. And that was the lie that began in 2014-15. The reason that it started, and they started using the word harass, was because Gamergate had also started. And Gamergate had established that the word harass was a bad word that right-wing lunatics did, right? So they used the Gamergate language against me by saying that me pointing out that they were lying, which they were objectively doing, was harassment, right? They then forgot about the original complaints, which they no longer can even tell you what they were. Ask Freya Katra, aka Freya Erlings, or any of these people, Kaitov, what the original complaint was that they sent to Mike Merles that they got harassed about.
Yeah.
What was in that email? What were they complaining that I did? They won't tell you, right? So they then created this thing that me calling them out for lying was harassment. This was years later, like, because then they had to fabricate a complaint about Mike, because I think it was once this thing with Mandy happened, I'm pretty sure. Once this thing with Mandy happened, Mike Merles like threw me under the bus just like everyone else. But these people hate official D&D and they want an excuse to complain about it, and they hate that Mike Merles ever hired me in the first place. So they still want to stick Mike Merles with something. So again, this happens 2014-15, all the way in 2019, years later. How can we still stick Mike Merles with something worse than having hired Zach? Freya then gets this idea, invents the lie that I gave Mike Merles that list. Like, Mike Merles gave me the list of people who wrote him complaints
Instead of the other way around.
and then I took this wholly secret group of people who I had no idea were harassing me, and I began to harass them on the internet, like totally skipping what literally everyone in the OSR scene saw happen.
Yeah.
Which
and
is
they claim like
always,
contact information too. They claim that like gave you like emails and stuff, but
I
that's
don't
obviously
know
not the case.
because it's not that detailed, like in
Yeah.
most versions of the conspiracy theory. But basically, like, everyone and their mother in 2014-15 knew that, like, these are people who had been going at each other for years, right? It's like saying that, like, in 1950, I got a secret list of people who hate the Jews, including Adolf Hitler. It's like, no, dude, there was a war, like. And then somehow I harassed them in, again, ways that were never recorded in any way.
Yeah.
This was, again, in that weird, like, generation step thing. Everyone in the OSR knew this was bullshit, but they all wanted to say something bad. So the people who weren't around at the time, like Skirples, picked it up from people who had been outside the OSR.
Which is why they say stuff like, when I started my blog, people warned me about Zach. Because they're just picking up what people had said before.
Yeah.
It's not that they're lying. They literally did have people tell them, yeah, Zach's bad. And they just
but these were not people who, like, knew, like...
because they're new and they think anybody says anything, they'll believe it.
Yeah, it is a boring conspiracy theory, but it is wildly bizarre. Like, why would someone who works at Wizard of the Coast... Number one, why would he need to give me a list, considering their list? why would I secretly harass anyone when there already was a roiling public discussion about all of these people already and whether you should be lying on the internet? It
Mhm.
clearly avails no one anything to send someone a nasty email. They all keep doing all the things they have, no matter what kind of censure they get. Like, nothing sort of suing has any effect. Like, other, like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, none of, yeah, it's just, it's lunacy.
Hmm. Okay, so I've been kind of scrolling through and checking, and I think a couple of the very last couple things I had written down. One thing that came up before is Viv's breast implants, and
Yeah.
that being like Zach bought them and he like used them, or like when I woke up from the surgery, he was like disparaging still. And you said specifically Mandy was the one who did that, and that was like a problem because she didn't really ask permission.
It wasn't that she didn't ask permission. It was like, basically Mandy and I, like, Viv had said, as, and this is recorded, it's on the internet, long before she was dating us, Viv was talking about how she wanted breast implants. She said in court under oath that she wanted them. It was her idea.
Mhm.
So that Facebook post, that any part that implies that I wanted them and I, like, this was my initiative, is
Like
a
you
lie.
tried to make it happen. Yeah.
She straight up said that. She then talked to me again, recorded in an email in January, how she's thinking about getting a loan to get them or getting a credit card so she can get them. Like, she's talking about funding them herself, whatever. Mandy then, on Viv's birthday, which is a few months later, volunteers, and I'm not around, to pay for Viv's breast implants. And she comes out and she said, I told Viv we'd pay for her breast implants. And I was like, yee, you know, we haven't been going out with her for that long, we're not living together. Like, it's a scary thing to buy your girlfriend something that expensive, you know, when the relationship's not that locked in. But I was like, you know, you already said it. I'm not going to undo it. That would be one more shitty, cruel thing I allegedly did in the Facebook post. If I, you know what I mean? Can you
Yeah, if
imagine
you
how,
tried to prevent it, yeah, or like made
you know,
her
if it was
feel
like,
bad about her
no, you
self-image.
know, like,
Yeah.
we can't use our joint bank account. It's really my money, you know, like,
Yeah.
there's no, like, you know, and I was like, you know, fine. All right. So that's what we're doing with that $4,000 to $8,000 or whatever it was. She gets them. Again, what's my point of view? I like Viv. She's going to live in my house where I want her to be my girlfriend and want her to like me. I don't have a motive to talk shit about her brand new surgery, which she really wants and talks about all the time.
I've never heard Zach talk shit about any kind of boobs.
And you've had more than one kind of boobs, right? So.
Yeah, I've seen all kinds of boobs come through the door, and it appears that you like them all.
So the idea that like somehow this was like a controlled thing, or like some way to, like, he would always say like you don't look good, or you don't look this way that I want you to look, and then he like tried to like get her to think I have to do it. That's not how it happened. Like, it was
How
something
do
she
you get
was.
a girl to participate in the probably, I think, only polyamorous relationship of her life, which includes moving in with the people, like, while by insulting her?
Yeah,
Like,
it's crazy.
like, I told Viv she was very attractive all the time. She was my girlfriend. Like, I like, again, this comes from like weird bad boyfriend stories on the internet. Again, Michelle was living with us until Viv moved in. Michelle and her husband at the time were our roommates. They saw each other all the time. So she can speak to this. Like, you're not going to be able to convince someone to do something that unusual and kind of, you know, emotionally risky by insulting them all day about the things that they're like most insecure about. Like,
Yeah,
it
and
was,
like, you know, there's such a thing as like negging, but like if it was such constant put downs, like what attracted her to you two, and what made her want to uproot her life and come over there, like, or how would that help you force her to move in with you if you're just putting her down, talking shit about her body and stuff all day, like.
also, we have the tapes. I have I don't know, like 8 to 16 hours of like unedited footage of just Mandy and Viv and everybody else like on set at like just in between takes, whatever, talking during I Hit It With My Axe, recording like who talks about boobs and who's objectifying and all that. And like, literally everyone at the table except me, that is all the girls, are constantly bringing up tits, especially Mandy and Viv. They're constantly comparing their boob size. Like, it's just what they talk about. I don't say a goddamn word except once where I'm agreeing with Satine. Like, she's like, nice boobs. And I think I'm like, yeah, or something. Like, that's it. But like, I don't know, 11 or 12 times, like I made a supercut of it because it was so ridiculous. Like, every comment she says about my way of degrading her or talking down to her or objectifying her, whatever, that is like, I looked for every single thing in this footage because this is the record that we have, right?
Yeah.
It's literally just her and Mandy talking incredibly crudely about women and each other and boobs, and me being like, just that's great. Like, it's
The
hard.
days that we shot those episodes, there's, we're rolling camera for like 8 to 10 hours a day, like,
and cutting it down very heavily.
yeah.
Yeah, and there's not like, that's just cameras rolling the whole time, like no edits. That's just like what we were doing.
No, like scene, like it's like a continuous shot.
Yeah, it's just because we're just playing D&D basically and having lunch, and then we would go all day, and it's just like, that's just banter. And it's like, they are trying to describe themselves as like little sensitive flowers who were dominant. I mean, also there's decisions made on those tapes that are like pretty big. Like, on the tape, we decide whether to have a second season or not. And somebody goes, Zach, is there going to be a second season? And I said, well, I told the guys that there will be if you guys want to do it, and there won't be if you don't. I don't know. And then on the tape, the girls, Mandy very much included, are like, oh, we're going to have a second season. And they tell me, like, when do we stop shooting? When they decide to. Like, the image of like the image of me of controlling all of these people it's not sustainable at all based on any of the records that we have.
And plus we had like Chris in there with the camera. We had someone doing sound, like, and like, how do you control a room full of women with other guys present watching, being like, yeah, it's cool that he's doing that.
Yeah, like every single person in that room other than Mandy and Viv has either like been like, yeah, I don't know, or been like, yeah, Zach's telling the truth. Like,
and well, and Viv has a potential reason to be specifically in relation to that. She was out of it whenever it went to Maxim, which has been like a point of contention. From what you presume, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I think what really happened after the fact, like, I didn't know this when I wrote my post, was that she, like, the guy that she had started dating without telling us while we were together later became someone that she stayed with for 9 years. So what was really happening, which I did not know about, was that she had basically fallen in love with someone else and wanted to be out of the three-way relationship and dating him. And so
her priorities shifted and things got messy, and then got complicated.
That's the end of a normal relationship. But like, I didn't know anything about that at the time. She was just sort of lying to us and kind of dodging around shit. That was why the relationship ended.
All right, I think that's about everything. I have one more question. I think this is the most. Well, okay, I have two more. This is one. Patrick Stuart, Jay Allen, which is the Goon, Olivia Hill, and somebody named Hardcore, who actually had a screenshot. They say you impersonated Applecline, Shannon Applecline on Reddit. That goes around all the time.
Yeah, it's
as
really
like
weird.
Evidence of sock puppetry.
There's no point at which anyone asks the Sapplecline who they are, and no point where they go, I'm Shannon Applecline. Like, but again, I had a friend who, like, basically I met them at Indiecade, which is like the Festival of Independent Games here. It's mostly video games.
It was around Red and Pleasant Land, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think the first one I did was Vornheim, right? So I had a friend that I met there, right? And they were like somebody who was like weirdly obsessed with, like, they knew all the drama, right? They knew all the scene drama, and they were kind of a lurker, but they also kind of were like, yeah, they had a marginalized status, so they were scared of being harassed, so they were very anonymous online. And basically they were also somebody like I could talk to about all the drama because they cared about it, which in real life very few people do, you know,
Mhm.
like and so they were like, oh my god, those like fucking, you know, the people who are harassing you guys online are crazy and this and that, and we would talk all about it, you know. I met them once at Indiecade, and then it turned out that they were staying with someone. I live in a big building. They were staying with someone in this building years later. And so I'd see them once in a while. It wasn't somebody who I had a lot of contact with, but it was somebody like when we'd talk for a while. And basically at the time, I didn't really realize that Reddit, like anyone could just get on Reddit. I thought it was like Metafilter, where like you had to pay a fee and you had to be a special person. Um, because it generated so many hits, I thought it must be a special place. So I never really bothered to see like, what do you have to do to get a Reddit account? And they had a Reddit account with a history. And so, you know, they were saying whatever they were saying online. And I was like, and I was like, oh, I wanted to ask about, I think I just at first wanted to ask about the game Dominions, which is like a video game. Like I wanted to go on the Dominions forum and ask a question about it. And they're like, oh yeah, use my Reddit account to ask that and whatever. And then we both used that Reddit account back and forth. And at the time it was a joke. It was like, well, what should we name the Reddit account, you know? And like, you can name it whatever you want. And it was like Sappelklein, because I think Shannon Appleklein's other name was Shannon A. And it was just a joke. It wasn't an attempt to pretend to be that person any more than like somebody whose like Twitter screen name is Barbara Streisand.
Yeah. Well, you see all the time with in particular in porn, people will literally grab all these publicly available photos, will grab like a handle and try to impersonate these people.
Yeah, that's an
impersonation. You were not trying to do that.
No, it was
that
just
was not the intent.
It was a joke on this person's name, and it wasn't even the full name, you know, and nobody ever asked, who are you? And the things that we posted were just normal things, you know, like they weren't things that attempting to sound like Shannon. They weren't things, you know, attempting to promote me. They were just whatever. Like I didn't use it that often, but you know, there was an account. And so we were hanging out, and then at one point, the night that my video game came out, Mandy was with Hannah. It was a Wednesday, I believe. And I did not know the game was coming out on the Wednesday, I don't think. And I went down to the bar. I went down to LA Cafe, which is near my house. And my friend was hanging out there. And I was like, shit, my game just came out. Like the internet's going to go insane. And we hung out. We were watching a movie on one laptop, and we were commenting on the other laptop and passing it back and forth. By that time, I had my own account because people started asking questions. So I was like, oh, it would be good to be like an AMA, like, oh, I'm Zach Smith, and this is what's in the game. You know, like I had my own account, which I had gotten years ago. But we were passing them the laptop back and forth, and the commenting laptop, and we were watching a movie. We were watching Face Off on the other laptop, and like, you know, wires got crossed and somebody wrote I on the other one and whatever. And like, that became a conspiracy theory that I was impersonating Shannon Appleklin, despite the fact that like nobody ever asked that account whether they were Shannon Appleklin, and nothing that Shannon Appleklin does or says or is characteristic of Shannon ever appeared on that account. Just like Twitter account named Barbara Streisand's, you know, left toe never gets asked, like, are you actually a left toe? Like, you know, it was just not even a thing.
That game was We Eat Blood, the VTM thing.
We Eat Blood, and all
our friends are dead.
All our friends are dead. Yeah, the
text-based one.
Yeah. When you release a video game, even a very minor one, you get so much immediately response compared to a RPG. It's wild. It's just like the whole internet feels like it's looking at you at once, and it was just like this flood of crazy harassment from the usual people because they're like, fuck. Yeah. So anyway, we go on there. So Etten goes, Zach used a secret account to promote his own shit, which I took Etten to court. Not true. Patrick then claimed that I was using it to make fun of Shannon, but Patrick never actually clicked on the account to read the comments to check whether that was true, and he's never apologized. And it's like, these things are like transparently not true, like, and easy to check. Both of those things are easy to check. Nobody ever has, and now, you know, that's one more conspiracy theory.
Yeah. So, I've heard, I think from you at some point you talked about, you sent the draft for that game, or like the final draft, from Scruples' living room. So
no.
Scrap Princess. Okay, that's what it was. Skirple's living room would be insane because that person's very anonymous compared to Scrap
think I
Princess.
know who Skirples is
Mm.
now, but it's a theory, and I don't want. Yeah, I'm not
Well,
sure.
but anyway, so
But anyway, yeah.
most of these people that have like levied all these things, out of them, Scrap Princess is somebody you actually knew, not as well as like your immediate group
Yeah.
of players, but you knew them. So what led to them making the accusations if they knew you? Did they just not know you well enough?
My feeling is that, like, unfortunately, like a lot of trans people, Scrap's probably I believe my understanding is that Scrap was a victim of pretty intense sexual abuse in the past or something traumatizing, and like that will skew someone's point of view, but I also know that when it comes to talking about, also Patrick is Scrap's best friend, and so when during that end period where Patrick had stopped being friends with me before the Mandy thing,
Yes.
and Scrap was still friends with me, the relationship was a little bit weird, because Scrap was like, I hate all of this online shit. I hate all of it. And I hate, the way trans issues are discussed. I hate the way the OSR is discussed. I just want to be all away from it. And I was like, yeah, that's an appealing thing. But on the other hand, like, you got to put out the stuff. And, if you want, like, I wanted to basically put out Demon City, give it away to somebody else who would handle the IP and then leave, but basically we were both kind of like sour on the whole thing, but I was, I had to be engaged in order to just do my stuff, and then I think that, there's a big mental barrier for Scrap to saying a woman is not telling the truth about abuse, and a big mental barrier to disagreeing with Patrick, her best friend, about something so important. So, or at least Patrick's best friend is Scrap. I don't know if the other way around. But it was, that was the only time that we were together, was me and Scrap, because it was my sister's wedding. And so I was staying in New Zealand, but it was painful, but it was also like, again, compared to like people like Michelle, who've been in my life all along, these people were acquaintances, like
it wasn't as much of a relationship as maybe I was led to. I was kind of thinking like maybe they knew each other better than maybe a little bit better, but not like super well.
All the time online, and we had no idea what each other were like in real life in casual situations. Like I think there's like, everybody probably has people like that now in their lives, where they're like, as an internet presence, they are there discussing your niche interest all the time. But as somebody who could describe your sexual behavior or like your inner drives, like we don't have those conversations, like I spent one weekend with Scrap and one weekend with Patrick, and the rest of the time that we were interacting, we were playing games or talking about games,
Well, that's something I could say as a woman too, is if I wasn't so close to the two of you, and I was just an acquaintance of Mandy's, and she came out with her statement, my default would just to be to side with her and believe what she said and just leave it at that.
Well, I think that was a very important thing to have done at the beginning. I've said this before in comments to people, is like Mandy 100% and all the rest, Vivka, Hannah, and Jennifer all needed to be believed and like supported. But so did Zach. Everybody that was accused, or either side, like they all needed to be given like the proper room to like make those things known. Can't just say like they're right and Zach is automatically wrong. It's more like we need to protect them both, right?
Not everyone needs to be believed, but everyone needs to be given the opportunity. Like the process matters, which of course, again, they have, if you think the other person is Hitler, fuck the process. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And I think that
it makes sense why they did what they did.
The process argument is not convincing to people in the face of what they see as overwhelming evil. The real problem here has always been, in my mind, if you get someone who cares about the facts, I've already won. But most people don't care about the facts. They don't see me as a human being who is entitled to all the things that you give a human being. And they don't see me as a human being because I once told one of their friends to stop being a dickhead on the internet, and they would like to cease to see that person as a person. And once you stop owing someone fairness because they're not a good person anymore, all this process shit about what's fair and what's not fair is details, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's what happens. Like, I mean, Michelle can attest to this. Frankie can attest to this. I, to a certain extent, can say this. I've had that exact thing happen where they're like, "You're a sock puppet," or "You're just an idiot," or "You're like trying to screw people over." It's the exact same thing where they're just trying to like dismiss you, basically dehumanize you, where they're just like, "You're obviously fake," so then they don't have to worry about you anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is like there are definitely, we've all encountered like political positions on Facebook and the internet where you're like, that person's so outside of anything real that I don't owe them fairness. You know, like if someone's a fucking clearly anti-Semitic, racist, whatever, like, you know, hell, if even someone's just a Trump supporter, I'm like, fuck you. You know, like you're out of what I need to be caring about, you know, like especially if they're a stranger, you know.
Yeah. My favorite is going to a Twitter profile of somebody who followed me, and they're like posting a lot of or retweeting a lot of like heavily like Christian stuff, like about abortion. I'm like, your post is all about RPGs, and then you're just retweeting a bunch of like heavily political things. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna dip immediately. Um,
Yeah,
I
and
agree.
it basically what all of these like peripheral accusations are about, like all the conspiracy theories, are about trying to establish that I'm not owed fairness. Because once I'm owed fairness, I win. Like any kind of fair contest here, like they have no evidence. They won't even answer the most basic questions. There's tremendous, like I have more witnesses. I have more everything you're supposed to have when you're proving and disproving things.
Mhm.
But basically, like Zach's not owed fairness because he was mean to my friend once. And it's like, yeah, show me when I was mean to your friend, and I will show you exactly how much of a massive, dangerous dickhead your friend was being. And yeah, but then I would, you know, that's something you do to someone who's owed fairness. Like
Yeah.
they want to get me out of that niche so that you don't have to give me that consideration.
So the problem kind of now is that you're going through a process that actually cares about all that evidence and all that important things that you have in like the actual basis you have to make your claims. You're going through that process legally, and it's slow. And so in the meantime, people are just weaving like an insane tapestry of madness that
Yeah, and
is
they
really
want
hard to counter.
angry that there is a process. Like how many are like, "Oh, you're suing people, you're evil." It's like, yeah, you know, I'm Jewish. I'm sorry that I'm Jewish and that, you know, that I have a lawyer. Like I'm sorry that I'm defending myself. I'm sorry that like it's like, you know,
I'm sorry
it's
that I
so,
cared about the industry and tried to make it better and pissed off your friend. Like it's
yeah.
just the stuff that happens, and then they
Yeah. And
blame you for it.
yeah.
Okay, just so we can, I don't want to. We've taken quite a bit. This is a question. This is probably the most absurd one, but it's one of the things that I see all over the place, and I've even seen like fan art of this one. According to nearly all goons, you shit your pants in front of a Chick-Fil-A at Gen Con 17.
I've never been to Chick-fil-A. I didn't really even know what it was until you know, they had that
Is it a
homophobic.
regional thing?
I have no idea. There's
Huh.
one in LA across from yeah, I don't
So do you know where this even started from? Because
yeah, I
I
know
found
where
so
started.
many people who would
Yeah,
say
of
it, and I
course.
You
couldn't even
weren't
find
in
where
the
it originated.
Chick-fil-A, Zach. You were in front of the Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't know how to locate the Chick-fil-A. It started because of Etten.
Okay, so
Basically,
that did start from Etten.
Etten wrote a
Okay.
long parodic article about that. Like, and it was like, you know, Etten tries
I,
to be a writer. Like
I
that's
think,
Etten,
yeah,
you know, and
it's
so
like
he
Prince
was
of
trying
Nothing.
like
Prince of
a
Nothing does
comic piece
that.
about I can't prove this, but yada yada.
Hmm.
And then, you know, everybody retweeted it. The weirdest thing I've heard is people saying that I sued him because he said that, which of course, you know, like he wrote that the whole point of that piece was that he said, I can't prove it, yada yada. He
Yeah.
didn't, you know, like I sued him because he said I was an abuser. And he says in his post that I defamed, like that was defamatory when I called him. Like the
Yeah.
whole settlement and his public statement and apology was about abuse, not about that shit. I mean,
Yeah.
that's why they say it.
Yeah.
It's
I think that's one of those things that I had to read that was like, I had to go on the Wayback Machine to read that post because it got taken
But also
down.
a nice thing about that, which is there's a lot of things like this that I don't talk about because they make my life easier, which is every single person who retweeted that or even refers to it, like if you have to prove malice in court or they have some previous beef with you or they don't take their accusations seriously, you just pull that out. You're like, look, they did this. And they're like, oh yeah, this person had it in.
Yeah,
for
just
you.
like insulting you. Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
I mean, if you just said like, "Oh, I believe Mandy, and so I retweeted this," and yeah, like then you can make the argument that you didn't, lie with malice. You could try, but as soon as like when they do shit like that, like people make fun of my hair, like all the shit that they do, like it makes it so much easier to do court stuff because you can just be like, "Oh yeah, look, they did this too," and you're like, "Oh fuck," which is I think that one reason why like the OSR people tend to be a little bit more careful than the people from outside that scene because they actually know that a lot of the shit about me is not true because they interacted with me for years, and so
Yeah.
they're very careful about which things that they and even the things that they do think are true. I think a lot of them just haven't talked very much in the last few years because they said one thing and then they kind of dip out.
Whereas somebody
they
like
realize like, oh fuck, like a lot of this is not true. Whereas the people who like from Something Awful and the story game scene and from RPGNet, they've had very little actual contact with me in any sense ever. And so they will believe and repeat anything and but they also don't have like a real concrete idea of the fact that like I behave in a generally like rational manner, like and I'm gonna sue people for things that, they did. So,
you had talked earlier about like the Gamergate stuff and like people coming on from that as well. Like you see
yeah.
somebody like Zoe Quinn who was initially fine and then became friends with Etten, and then suddenly she's sharing the same positions of like Zach is a horrible abuser. So yeah, you'd see people like an influx of people that aren't from the OSR that don't really pay attention to what you say or what you read. They'd be like,
No,
he's racist, and they don't see the video or the maps of you like avoiding LA police because of BLM protests.
they took me to fucking paddy wagon.
I know.
you
And
know.
they're like, oh no, he's definitely, or
No,
they say he's racist and they don't watch I Hit It With My Axe, or
they
he's
have
transphobic and they don't like read your play reports.
Yeah, I mean, in the way, like just knowing that a bunch of people online are stupid is like everyone should. The weird part is the people who had interacted with me and had been through the grinder every time of me going, "Do you have proof? No, you don't." And then they, "Well, do you have proof? Yes, here it is. Click, boom." Like just who had seen over and over that I say something, I fucking back it up, and then being like, in a way, I think that weirdly made them suspicious. Like the idea of proof is itself suspicious in an era where everybody just wants to say shit and run away.
Okay, is there anything that I think I feel like I covered all the important things that I've seen a lot. There's probably small individual things that I'm missing, but is there anything that springs to mind?
I
Is
mean,
there any big? Because there's so many accusations, right?
there's so many things, and there's so many things that have happened in court that are just so weird and silly and bizarre
We'll
that,
get there eventually.
um, but I don't know. I feel like I feel like maybe just like asking Michelle to sort of like from talk about like her relationship to Mandy and to the game, or mostly to Mandy over the years, might just clarify like I don't know, like you guys met how, like just like what's the story of that might
Yeah.
help.
Mandy and I both used to model for Suicide Girls. And when I moved to LA in 2008, we kind of bonded over both being part of that site and also both being from Canada. Um, so we finally got together and hung out. I got to know Zach and also my ex-husband Steve. We all just kind of hung out together. We ended up living together as roommates. Mandy introduced me to D&D. I started playing with them like maybe 2009.
Yeah, because I feel I must admit that I found it challenging to kind of write. Zach has said so many things, and so many people have said things in Zach that it's not super hard for me to find a lot of questions, but finding questions for you was a little bit harder.
Yeah, because I kind of keep a low profile.
Yeah, and I'd also seen that you're not necessarily the kind of person who wants to get in a ton of arguments and is super comfortable like with all that. So
Um,
I'm just glad that you were there and that you're backing him up.
yeah, I try to get my big girl pants on sometimes and get out there,
Yeah, I mean,
fight truth out there.
I started the blog and we started playing again like in 2009. So that was like all of this is during the time that we were like either living with Michelle or she was there.
2009, yeah, I was there all the time as an assistant at that time. And then I think you guys moved in with us in 2010.
And you weren't working for me at that point.
No.
And then
I was dancing and we were shooting. I hit at my ex at our place that we all lived at.
And this was not a giant compound either. It's a place where we all had the same living room and we could hear each other having sex.
It's a regular 2-bedroom apartment with 2 couples living in it. And the same friend group coming and going.
So it's not just like, oh, you were a friend, you hung out. It's like you were like an integral part. So I think it's so crazy that people just try to discount you as a sock puppet whenever you're one of the few people that can say, I was literally there the majority, if not all the time, that most of this stuff is supposed to have happened.
Yeah, whether working for Zach, whether playing the games, living together, eating in the same kitchen, watching TV in the same living room. And then when I moved back in with them in 2013, that was the loft that Zach is still living in now. It's one big room. The only separate room in there is the bathroom. Besides that, we're all in the same space, and we're there every day.
So it's very much an environment where you gotta be buddies. You gotta interact with Mandy and know Mandy. It's not just
you can see everything. You can see what's going on.
You can look and see Zach painting. You can look over there, see Mandy playing like a video game or reading or And whenever Zach is painting and he needed to be doing that,
they can look over and see me scrolling on my Facebook way too much.
It's just all part of it.
Yeah, I mean the thing is like Mandy's accusations are about how I was all the time. Michelle's not a fucking
like all the time, like
character witness. She's a witness. She's a fucking eyewitness.
She's not just Zach was good. It's like I saw what happened.
Yeah, it's not like I didn't see that. It's like
I just need to let everyone know that I think Zach is a good guy. It's like no, I just need to let everyone know that I was there and it didn't happen.
Yeah. Ben, is there anything else that you want to do right now?
No, I think that's mainly what we were trying to get at, was trying to like address these concerns in a different format, I guess. Because we've been going at it a good long while. I didn't want to keep anybody, super long time. I know that you guys said you had time open, but you guys are probably a lot more busy than I am. So
well, this is important for
me
anyway.
Yeah, well, of course, it's important for me too, but you know what I mean? Maybe it's likely very important, more important for you. So yeah, if there's nothing else that you needed to do, I mean, what I'll do is, of course, I'll take this, I'll look over it, I'll be transcribing it. In the next couple of days, I'll be posting it everywhere, and then
we can talk about that stuff once we're done recording.
Like,
we can
do I can,
and let Michelle go. So
So I think if that's it, we can finish recording as long as nothing else is important.
Okay, cool.
I just want to thank you guys so much for your time, because, like I said, you guys took a lot of time and a lot of energy to do something like this. Because I just want to thank you for it's not easy for you guys to say. I just want to say I'm sorry that you had to do all of this. It's not fun to have to defend yourself this way. I can only imagine.
No, it's way more fun than just watching everyone talk about you when you don't get to defend yourself, honestly. So,
but it's still got to be hard. So, thanks for your bravery on that. I like I said, I can't really imagine being in that situation because I haven't had something like this happen to me.
Yeah, that's the biggest problem. Is it's hard to imagine your way through it, and so people they'll believe a lot of things that they wouldn't normally if they were imagining it all the way.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.